All right, and start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. And I'm here, Spin, and so no EPL going on now. So this will be a bit of a special episode. So we're going to review the UEFA Champions League final, and the episode will basically focus on the game. But also, there's going to be a little side discussion that I'm pretty excited about. So one thing that my friend talked about was he said a side story in all of this is kind of the downfall of Barcelona and how if you went back to just 2015, uh, so yeah, nine years ago, but it just you wouldn't have seen them basically not making another final again, and you just wouldn't have seen Madrid not just catching them, but surpassing them. And it basically they went on and they ended up winning three in a row. And then things stalled a little bit, and then they bring in Ancelotti, and now they've won two out of three, and they've just signed Kylian Mbappe. And you look at the profiles and age of their squad, and this looks like they are set to legit dominate the sport for a little bit now. I mean, I think they won it for like the record 16th time. Uh, but this feels a little different. But we'll see how that pans out. But mostly just kind of start off. I guess the leading off story is they are the kings of the competition again, and it's thanks to a goal that probably no one, even the hard like the most hardcore Real Madrid fan, they probably wouldn't have picked Danny Carvajal to be the one to save them. And what a terrific header this was! It happened in the 74th minute, gave Madrid the lead, and that was all they really needed. But in a game that they were basically thoroughly outplayed, I'll be honest. But that has been Real Madrid under Carlo Ancelotti. In my opinion, it just feels like in 2022, every knockout tie, whether it was PSG, whether it was Chelsea, whether it was Man City, and whether it was Liverpool in the final, I felt like that was kind of the same thing. They were thoroughly outplayed, and yet they win. And I feel like I could say the same thing. Same thing this go around. I thought Leipzig had every right to beat them. In the early stages, I thought Bayern Munich as well, and it just felt. Yeah, even Man City. Man City had them on the ropes, and Kevin De Bruyne scored the goal to get Man City back in it, and then he had actually had a couple misses himself, and then after Modric missed a PK, Man City actually had a chance to actually control those penalty kicks, and then lo and behold, everyone remembers what Bernardo Silva did, and then Mateo Kovacic missed as well. And we just get here, and no one can explain it. Like the discussions online were, is Madrid even good? But they haven't. I think they've only lost maybe twice since September. They said they didn't lose in the Champions League like at all. So obviously they're doing something right. So we'll get into it. Uh, I mean, Dortmund had them on the ropes, but at the same time, they didn't make anything count, and it was kind of it was similar in some respects to what we saw last week with the FA final, where Man United kind of set up something similar versus Man City, but the difference is Man United did get their chances to count, and they did go in with a halftime lead. Dortmund weren't able to do that, so all of their good work, it was still 0-0 at halftime, and you just figured eventually the legs would probably tire out, and as that would happen, Madrid would probably start to take advantage of that, and all they would need is just a corner kick, and the corner kick comes out of really nothing. In fact, they get the first corner kick by an outrageous run and dribble by Vinny Jr. He goes past Hummels like he's not even there, and then he does a nutmeg to get past Ryerson. And I mean, that's just Vinny is a star right now, and yeah, he tapped that off with basically scoring the second. So they didn't need it, but it helped them basically clinch it because the second goal came in the 84th minute. And by that time, Dortmund really didn't have a chance to come back. There wasn't going to be any miracle comebacks here. And so Vinny Jr. gets the goal that his performance deserved. And it is possible a milestone or changing of the guard in some respects in the sport. He is expected to win the Ballon d'Or now, and it happens as the news of Mbappe joining, and Mbappe is joining, and he's not going to be the Ballon d'Or holder. It might be the person that plays in his position. So it's going to be funny how. It's gonna be fun to at least see how that works. Now, it is that's the saying I have in the note is the rich getting richer, and that basically is what's happening here. because yeah, Madrid win the Champions League, and now they have signed who most people expect, or I guess most people say is the best player in world football at the moment in Kylian Mbappe. And so, will it? It's going to be fascinating to at least see how this works. Now, it's been expected to happen for like 3 or 4 years now. To be honest, it was a surprise it didn't Mbappe didn't join in 22, and I've always wondered that was maybe a mistake. Because now he's joining at a time when the team is Vinicius Junior's, and it's hard to not argue he's better at that position than Mbappe. Mbappe is going to have to play through the middle more, and it hasn't seemed like he's like that. But the way I was watching uh, this final, there were so many moments when Vinny Jr. was getting the ball out wide, he would look up and there would be no one to play a ball into. There would be no one making a run. Bellingham would be too far behind the play. So I'm thinking it's going to be Bellingham that actually gets hurt by this, or maybe Rodrigo, than necessarily Vinny. I think they can play together. I think Vinny Jr. Has shown he can play through the middle if needed. We saw that versus Man City, where when Rodrigo was played on the left, Vinny Jr. was played through the middle. I believe versus Bayern Munich, Vinny Jr. was played through the middle in the first game. It's probably not where he loves to play, and I think they can actually be fluid, and we might see that. Well, we'll see. One goes, it has a few minutes on the left, and then plays in the middle, and then it'll be kind of the reverse. And if that is the case, if they will be fluid, it'll be really hard for defenders to man mark. Uh, so it's going to be fascinating, nonetheless, and at least it'll be entertaining. If but if but because it'll be so much different than what we've seen. The trend go to. The trend has been more about having control. Basically, some teams and managers have been getting away from even having pacing wingers at all. They've been playing almost midfielders in that position. They've been some managers have been using width to just be wingbacks. Just they have defensive minded people who just kind of cross the ball in. You're going to have a team that has the two most dynamic players on the ball on the same team on the same pitch at the same time, and Bellingham to me is a midfielder, so I don't really know if it's going to be that big a drop off. Now they're not going to have Tony Cruz to necessarily spray the ball around. So where they're going to get that? Is that in Bellingham's game or not? We'll have to see about that. Jude's not going to be able to play his false nine. That I can say. But Bellingham can probably fit in midfield. He looks like a midfield player in the final. So I don't really know how much different that is going to be. Uh, Rodrigo is the one that does look. I don't know how he's going to work. He doesn't seem to enjoy playing on the right side, and you're gonna need someone to fit in there. So I'm thinking it could be Fede Valverde who just slots into the right side. He's not really going to be a goal scoring player on the right side, but he's going to offer runs, and he's basically going to do a lot of defensive work. So you can maybe play Fede Valverde, and he kind of plays almost kind of deeper, and you probably just have it'll be left sided bias. You can imagine. Uh, but you'll probably just have that, and then they're possibly going to add Alfonso Davies as well. I don't really know how that's going to work, but that it seems to be that is what they're linked to, and you can imagine a scenario where they have a Jude Bellingham and maybe uh, either a Camavinga or Chouameni. Maybe they do Chouameni even at they play a high line. They play Chouameni at center back and have Camavinga with Bellingham. Uh, I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how it works. But that is what it seems to be the case. At least for me. I don't. We'll have to. Anyways, but that is for the future. As far as staying on the game, the story really was as much as Vinny Jr. having his moment was Carvey Hall's. A player that has battled through a lot of leg injuries through his career. So they said even all that he's been able to play in all six of his final start in all six of the finals, and it is fitting that he gets the game winner to help them win the record six, just like Tony Cruz. I don't know if Modric has been there for all six, but he's up there as well, and he was at least able to get a few minutes here and there. It is Tony Cruz's final hurrah, and I was wondering if maybe they shouldn't have even played him in the first half because I didn't think it was working. But in the second half, as Dortmund kind of tired a little bit, Cruz really did start to. He didn't necessarily take over the game in open play, but what he did, well, he was always spraying the ball, which was finding Vinny. But the main thing was just his set piece delivery was basically basically what changed it. To be honest, his corner kicks looked dangerous every single time, and Dortmund had a lot of corner kicks themselves, and Brandt wasn't able to do the same things. He wasn't able to deliver the same ball, and his set piece delivery was excellent. And his a couple of the free kicks that he had for some pretty big saves. So Tony Cruz had a memorable final as well, and I think he possibly is going to play for Germany in Euros, and then after that he will be calling it quits. And so that's kind of where we are. We're gonna set up and gonna talk about the final, but also I want to talk about the subject that my friend brought up because Madrid and Barcelona as a little side story is a lot of fun. I think it'll be a fun little topic to get into because again it wasn't that long ago that it just didn't feel it felt like Barcelona were kings of Europe. Not just having Messi, they had Messi, Neymar, and Suarez. At one, they just looked absolutely unbeatable with that front three, and it is just absolutely quite stunning how the next year they end up knocking out. They had like a 4 goal lead over PSG, and then I think they get knocked out there. And then the next summer they lose Neymar because PSG activates a release clause that no one was expecting anyone was going to be able to pay. And then they didn't do well with that release clause. Everyone knew Barcelona had a lot of money, and two clubs, Dortmund and Liverpool, basically bilked them out of that money. And they didn't buy. They didn't buy properly. They didn't, facilitate Messi with the players that he needed, and I'm gonna get into what I think happened. So it could be fun, and also that's just what Barcelona did. What Real Madrid did is interesting and telling as well because they didn't in the beginning they kind of copied Barcelona. When they lost Ronaldo, what did they do? They went to Chelsea and paid like 140 million for Eden Hazard, who didn't have legs anymore, uh, and just wasn't the same player. They brought in Chelsea's Philip Coutinho, and you did they didn't understand what they were missing. What they were losing with Neymar was the dynamism, the runs off the ball, the wide creation. Philip Coutinho was never really that kind of player, and asking him to have a different role ended up just not working out. And when Real Madrid brought in Eden Hazard, it was kind of the same kind of thing. You didn't. I mean, Ronaldo was the most amazing box poacher in the world, and Hazard was, a 5'9", kind of, half space, creative, very fun on the dribble, kind of player, but it wasn't like for like. And then Madrid really did change up their strategy. They went younger. They started to really invest in the future and have a lot of promise and basically a long term project. And they were, as we can see, vastly rewarded with it. But another thing that's an interesting story is it's not just Real Madrid and Barcelona. It is Spain. It is Spain getting caught up by basically what happened in England, because for the long half of that 2010s decade, basically Spain dominated football in international competitions, just the actual nation of Spain, but also in Europa and Champions League. Whether it was Real Madrid, Barcelona, or even Atletico Madrid making Champions League finals, it was Sevilla winning all the Europa competitions. And then everything stopped. Everything changed with all of a sudden England brought in just a top flight manager after manager, whether it was Tuchel, Conte, Klopp, or Pep. And it just seemed to everything started to change when the financial power started to really go in England's direction with the TV contracts. And it just seemed Spain were completely caught up in this. And then Spain, the actual La Liga loses Messi and Ronaldo, and it just they didn't have they just weren't prepared for that. And Madrid has been able to handle that a lot better than Barcelona, as we have seen. And now they've gotten into a situation where they've saved up the money over years. They went basically 2 or 3 years without playing with a striker, or they had Benzema. They were able to win a Champions League and a Ballon d'Or with Benzema. But once they lost him, they saw that they saw that Mbappe was in the future, and they didn't want to do something short term. They didn't want to bring in a striker to help them, maybe in the short term, because they knew they would have to eventually have to free up wages to even if they would sign Mbappe on a free, they would have to have wage capital. So it has been tremendous to see how they've built up this team and how they've won 2 out of 3, and the age profiles are absolutely ridiculous. They also have Indrick coming in, who's 17. And this right now is scary for the rest of Europe, and so we'll see how it goes. And then maybe if I have a little time at the end, maybe I'll talk about it now. Uh, Another thing that happened on Saturday was the women's, kicked off with a little bit of a Emma Hayes' debut for the U.S. women's national team, and we're going to see how they perform in the Olympics coming up, which is basically that's as big as their World Cup. They take it a lot more seriously than we do for our Olympics. For our Olympics, it's mostly kind of a U-23 kind of a kind of squad. For the women's, it's a senior competition, and we haven't done well in the last two competitions. We did not do great in Australia, were knocked out by Sweden. Uh, and in the Olympics, I believe we finished third. I believe we got the gold medal, but at both times we were basically favored coming into the tournament, and that showed we shouldn't have been. And it hasn't worked out the last few tournaments, and it's the changing of the guard. No more Alex Morgan. Maybe Alex Morgan is still on the team, but at least in this game, Morgan didn't feature. No Megan Rapinoe. At least in this game, there wasn't Julie Ertz. We did see Rose Lavelle. It was expected that she possibly is nursing an injury. She's maybe a 50-50 for the Olympics, so it was good to at least see her. But we saw a bit of a changing. We saw some new stars. We did win. I believe the Gold Cup. A couple of months ago in beating Brazil, beating Canada. So there's maybe some show of promise that things are changing. Sophia Smith looked much better when she was played a little bit on the wing and not necessarily asked to be the either feature striker or to play with Alex Morgan. And she had someone to create with in Mallory Swanson. And we didn't have Mallory Swanson in Australia. I believe she was nursing an injury, and before formerly of Mallory Pugh, before the name change. Uh, she was in and out of the squad for some reason, and so it's great to see her back. And she's only still like 26 or so, and she scored two great goals, two great finishes, and then I think we added on a couple with some corner kick delivery or some corner kick goals. But the everything did look promising. 500 plus passes, lots of control, lots of possession, lots of shots, and lots of goals. So and she is off winning another title at Chelsea in the Women's Super League, and so it is going to be fun to see how Emma Hayes ball works for us. It's going to be something different, and it's interesting to see the soccer federation go in this kind of direction. It is a little more outside the box. We went outside of our league to bring someone else in. You can't imagine the men's national team necessarily doing this. So for all the sakes, we need to hope that this works out, and who knows, maybe it will. So that'll be something to follow at least coming up August for the Olympics. But anyways, that's kind of setting it all up. We will start with the Champions League final, and Real Madrid and Dortmund, and they do go on to win 2-0. The first with Carvajal in the 72nd minute, and then Vinny Jr. with his kind of capping off moment in the 82nd minute. People were kind of going on it and saying, "Oh, people are overreacting because Vinny had a goal." He was absolutely unreal. Just too often he was beating his man, and there'd be no one to play a ball to. If Mbappe is there and he's able to make a run off the shoulder, this could have been light work. And because too often June was too far behind the play, and it was almost seemed like he was asked to kind of do maybe a little too much. The false nine stuff can work at times. We saw it with Bruno Fernandes and Man United just last week. But it's different. It's different when you're the team sitting back, and you need to clog up the midfield because you've got 20% of the ball. Real Madrid had like 70% of it, and it's kind of it's not really fun when the team with the dominant team with the ball is also playing with basically not a striker. And too often Madrid were just kind of falling into that trap. They didn't have anyone to create into the box, anyone making any runs. They did change that a little bit in the second half, and that is why the second half was better. I thought Bellingham was doing better to make runs into the box. Uh, and so that's kind of where we got started with. So the leading off story is people just didn't wonder if this team is any good or not, and people are still kind of wondering that. They're not going to wonder that with the Mbappe signing. And then with Dortmund, it really was a celebration of the journey to get here. It started off in the group of death, as they said. With Newcastle, AC Milan, and PSG, and just they were just vast underdogs in everyone's eyes, and they at least people were worried a little bit that this was going to be a little. uncompetitive, I guess, and they at least didn't do that. They didn't sit back as well. They didn't just bunker in. They took the game to Real Madrid, and we got at least neutrals got a fantastic game. They just kind of petered out a little bit in the second half because they were able to make all of that injury lead to at least a goal. And but even before that, the story of the club of the last few years has been just almost, and then just kinda being a club that seemed they would never really be able to get back to this kind of level, to the final premier stage, basically, of the European, club level because they had Jadon Sancho in 2021, and then they lost him to Man United. They've always been kind of a selling club, almost like a build-up club. They lose Haaland in 2022, and then they lose Bellingham, and just it's 3 players back to back. They were able to get Sancho back this past January on loan, and, they had Klopp in the stands, to offer support, the last manager to help them win the league. They should have won the league last year. They just had a collapse at the very end, and so people were wondering, is Terzic, someone to take more serious? Him winning would have actually, totally changed people's opinions on him. But I do think given the way that the subs happen, there could be questions about him. The way he's handled Gio Reyna hasn't necessarily been great, to just kind of, give a personal grudge. That could be, nonsense on my end, but I just that's been something that's been a little in the back of my mind, but I didn't necessarily like the subs. But also you just looked they just didn't really have they just have any bench depth. And just I was worried about that coming in. I really was. And just had they just been able to get one of those goals in the first half, it could have possibly been entirely different. Yeah, they would have been able to sit back a little bit more. They would have been able to uh, kind of play the rest of the game on their tempo, on their terms, and they just weren't. And I do think basically what happened is their legs ran out. As far as the starting lineup goes, so we saw Carvalho, Rudiger, Nacho, and Mendy, Valverde, Camavinga, and Cruz as the midfield three, with Bellingham kind of as the anchor of that, really a diamond midfield, and then Rodrigo and Vinny up top. And the interesting thing here was no Tchouaméni, and he was playing with a stress fracture. I kind of didn't mention that in my preview. There was talks that maybe he could be available, and he was available on the bench, but he was never going to suit up. And so we did see Camavinga and Cruz, and I was wondering how this was going to work because uh, well, usually what happens is Cruz is the one that drops deep. Drew Cruz basically becomes another central defender essentially. And what that does is they usually Madrid kind of go into a back three with Rudiger and Nacho that allows Mendy to kind of play a little further forward. And Mendy is more of kind of a defensive minded fullback. He can make some runs into some overlaps, and Vinny was using him. But really, you can see where Alfonso Davies immediately changes the complexion of this team because Davies, Vinny on the same side, just I don't know how you would be able to defend that other than Madrid would do everything they're supposed to do, and maybe a cross or maybe a missed touch or maybe a keeper saves something, and then you can maybe counter on that side. But if Madrid potentially are able to build up the team that I think they can, it's not gonna be fun for everyone else. But the Camavinga and Cruz was a little interesting dynamic because when Cruz does drop deep, Camavinga, I think, is a little bit better on the ball technically than Tchouaméni, a little more offensive minded, offensive gifted, I guess I can say. But the interesting thing about that is, so Camavinga was the player that was used a little more further forward. And when Real Madrid had the ball, this was fine. This actually helped, went to their favor. Camavinga was spraying the ball with some great passes. Cruz from back deep, you couldn't get near him. So he was able to spray some passes and find Vinny Jr. But the problem is when they lost the ball or when Dortmund were able to counter, too often Camavinga was too high upfield, out of position, so there was no protection really in that back line. And Cruz just doesn't have the legs to be able to offer any kind of protection either. And it was really easy for Dortmund to pass or run around, really both. And once that happened, once they were able to get in behind, it was either Carvalho or Rudiger. They just were not able to handle Adeyemi at all. And Dortmund recognized this immediately. It was interesting to see Adeyemi played on that side. It looks like he's favored on his left foot. Usually, you don't really see that anymore. You usually see players that have a left foot, kind of play on the right to be quote unquote inverted, as they say. Adeyemi has played on the right side in a number of games. Uh, but here he was opted to play on the left to target Carvajal as a tactic. And man, did this work out? And it's just unfortunate that it didn't actually lead to any goals, but it should have. And then with Dortmund, we kind of saw a lineup that we were expecting. You know, Ryerson, Hummels, Schlotterbeck, and Madsen. And Hummels and Schlotterbeck had a lot of time on the ball. Madrid were trying to press him, oh, but these 2 players are really good when, we're just really comfortable with the ball at their feet, and maybe they don't have the best pace, so they were playing a little further back. They were playing with a little deeper of a high line, but they were making terrific decisions, and, again, the few times that they were able to just play around Madrid, pressing them, Sabitzer and Brandt were making good decisions in the middle, and then, either Sancho would have a ball, to play people in, and, just everyone was looking for Adeyemi when he was making his runs, and again, it was, it should have been better than what they got. Maatsen, although, was interesting because I was thinking maybe he could, run with, Adeyemi. Maybe Adeyemi could, play a little inside, and he would use, Maatsen's runs, as like an overlap to kind of take, someone off him. They weren't really doing that. They were almost playing Matson as, the word inverted again, but they were almost playing Matson as almost like an additional midfielder, at least when it came to build up. And it was interesting in the sense of it was helping Dortmund at least do a decent job of controlling the ball. Uh, but at the same time, there were a lot of kneeling moments where you were like, "Uh-oh." In fact, I'll get to one of the chances coming up. But Matson has a ball that nearly Vinny Jr. nicks off Hummels, and if he does, Vinny's to the races. And what's funny enough is Hummels does well to actually win the challenge, and then he gives it to Slaughterback, and Slaughterback plays the ball over the top, and that leads to the Falkwood chance, really the Brandt chance in the basically the first chance in the game for Dortmund. But it was nearly an uh-oh moment, for Madsen. But that said, Madsen also did have a beautiful ball for the Fulkwood chance, a few minutes later. So it's not necessarily like Madsen had a bad game, but there was just it didn't look comfortable playing in the middle. And then I think eventually his legs and brain just got tired, and him and Schlotterbeck didn't have the right communication. And it's unfortunately Madsen's pass that leads to the second goal that Vinny was able to put away. Uh, Sancho and Fulkrug, and then Adeyemi with Brandt, kind of the anchor. Brandt, kind of the connector basically as the 10. I think you possibly could have played Sancho as the 10. Um, I don't really know how maybe Adeyemi. I don't necessarily know if they wanted to do Adeyemi on the right. Sancho wouldn't have been able to do to Carvalho what Adeyemi was able to do. So maybe that's the reason why they did it. But Sancho didn't look comfortable. Sancho basically is a 10. He didn't really offer any kind of width to me. He didn't really offer anything in the attack. And what they were doing is they were using Ryerson to basically be their right winger. But that's risky. It's risky to do because Vinny Jr. is on, just waiting for a ball over the top, and they were doing that. They were getting Ryerson kind of caught out of position. When Ryerson was in position, Vinny was still beating him. Ryerson did a decent job, but at the same time, Vinny was still beating him. And then the few times when Vinny had to run past Hummels or Chan, it just wasn't. It wasn't really a fair contest. And the only reason why this really wasn't uncomfortable is because the few times or the many times that Vinny was able to make a run down that wing, he would have no one with him. Either Rodrigo wouldn't be with him, or or Bellingham. And again, that's not going to be the case now with Mbappe. Uh, so that's kind of setting it up where we are. Oh, one thing I do want to add is that said, I do think it's worth kind of praising the way Dortmund went into this game, the way that. So I think we should celebrate that because the approach was very optimistic. It was aggressive. It was upbeat. It was they were not just sitting deep and trying to wait out the game till the 70th minute. Now it's possible that would have gotten them into a better situation than they were. Maybe they would have saved some legs. But so I think we need to be careful about that. We don't need so much is about winning and losing. But you understand why. But at the same time, as far as like a neutral, this is supposed to be a sport for neutrals. And it needs to be entertaining. And so often these finals just aren't. We got an entertaining game, whether or not it was the score that people wanted. We at least got that, and I think it's good. I think it's good to at least. It's unfortunate that this approach hasn't been rewarded. It was very similar to me to the final in 22 when Liverpool kind of did the same thing to Real Madrid, and unfortunately for them, just it feels like more often than not that isn't what wins finals. What wins finals is being super pragmatic. It is kind of letting teams kind of come onto you, and saving your energy for the second half, and then kind of nicking something in the final 20 minutes. That is what quote unquote the game winning managers do. But that to me isn't necessarily great for the game. Just overall, at least in my opinion. I could be entirely wrong about that. Everyone's all about winning, so that could be a losing argument. But it's just had they just been able to put one of those away, I think it would have been a winning strategy. And they went for it. They went for it uh, in the first half. They really went guns a blazing, and they should have been rewarded for it. And so, getting started with the game. Immediately the first things that came to mind was Vinny versus Ryerson was basically going to be where you know, just a game within the game, basically. And so it was basically the main individual battle. Could we see Ryerson handle Vinny 1v1? And after the game, basically we started after the pitch invaders. we got our answer. Vinny tested that theory out himself and schooled him. Just basically kicked the ball on the touchline and just ran past him. Uh, and then Camavinga and Cruz, how would they work together? Cruz drops Camavinga more forwards. You understand that that's better for them when they have the ball, but could because you're not going to have cover in front of the back line. Could Dortmund maybe exploit that a little bit, and they did. And then Valverde and Carvajal was also interesting as well because it almost seemed like a tactic from the start was to get Vinny the ball, and then so get Dortmund to just commit to him and have everyone kind of shift over, and then Vinny or Cruz would do a long switch to Guardiola of all people, which is not what you would expect. You wouldn't expect him to be the one kind of being forward and being the most advanced man in their attack, at least on that right side, and that's what was happening. Valverde was almost used as a decoy or to be kind of tucking in midfield, and that was dragging Matson's attention, and Adeyemi wasn't necessarily doing the best to follow Cavadiol, and again it could have led to some bad things for Dortmund. It didn't. But it could have. It was risky for Adeyemi to actually leave Cavadiol, but Adeyemi was saving his legs for when Cavadiol was maybe out of position. So there's all this chess stuff going on. So that was fun, and so we finally get a chance. It's in the 15th minute. It comes really from nothing and by surprise because Madrid have all this possession in the first 15, 12-ish minutes, but nothing's really happened. But we finally get it here. So it's the full Krieg to Brandt chance, and I think Brandt needs to do better with the finish. He scuffs it a little bit. Uh, I don't think his touch is necessarily the best. I think he has a little bit of a heavy touch. Now that said, the game is flying. It's going 100 miles per hour. It's the biggest game basically in these guys' lives in some respect, or at least for the Dortmund players. So you can't really go at him that much. And it was I think Rudiger and even Courtois, they made themselves into big enough where the finish wasn't necessarily easy to put it on goal. So there was some of that, but it's unfortunate because it was nearly perfect. So here Madrid, let's see. What happens is it nearly happens where Dortmund nearly play themselves into trouble. So that's right. So Ian Matson plays the ball back to Mats Hummels. Vinny nearly anticipates it and intercepts it. And this would have been him to the races. He went to that, and he would have been 1v1 with the keeper. Hummels was strong in the challenge to keep the ball. Plays it to Schlotterbeck, who has a lovely 30-yard pass over the top to find Fulkrug, making a run behind Rudiger. Rudiger just doesn't think this pass is going to be on. We saw this in the semifinal versus PSG, where Schlotterbeck had that lovely ball over the top right to Fulkrug. It was very similar. Fulkrug was able to, at least because I was more towards goal, Fulkrug was able to collect it and actually have a shot on goal. This kind of took him away from the goal. But all things similar. It's a terrific ball by Schlotterbeck, and he impressed. He really did. Not with his distribution, clever balls over the top, but also his defending, which I'll get to as well. If Dortmund had won this game, probably people would have looked at Adeyemi. Schlotterbeck would have been worthy of man of the match considerations. But here, so it's a lovely ball to find Fulkrug. Fulkrug collects the ball well, and then he plays it to Julian Brandt. So Fulkrug does everything you're supposed to do. He makes the run. He's onside. And then he is able to pick the teammate out. I think the pass is pretty good as well. I don't think he hits it necessarily that hard. Just Brandt kind of has a little bit of a heavy touch, I think, and it gets to a point where it's hard for him to really get the shot off. Rudiger, Nacho, and Courtois all kind of have the ankles really tight, and he misses the shot wide. But I also think Carvajal gets away. I think with a cheeky shove on the back right before Brandt shoots as well. They didn't really look at it. No one, the announcers didn't even really talk about it. So it could be nothing. But I just think, maybe he got away with something there. And then right after, Valverde has a nice ball out to Cavariol, who couldn't pick out Bellingham. Dortmund have another attack. And so just a couple minutes later, this is the one Adeyemi has. So Adeyemi has played a ball with a lovely Mats Hummels pass. And this is the moment where Real Madrid are completely taken by surprise. No one was in 5 yards of Adeyemi here. He's timed the run to perfection. And as the ball is played by Hummels, Adeyemi is in. And he just has Courtois to beat. And he opts to go around him. And I think that's the right move. But I think he could have run around him from the right side of the pitch, not the left. And Courtois does as well as you can do in this situation. He makes himself big, makes it awkward. Adeyemi does well to successfully go around him, but the touch is maybe just a tad heavy. He's forced to go wider than maybe he wanted, and by the time he's caught up to the ball, there is still an empty goal. But Rudiger is back to maybe block the shot, and Carvalhal has also done well to sprint back, and he actually blocks the shot, so they don't even get a shot on goal here. I mean, Carvalho was everywhere. Now he got screwed, or he screwed up by allowing himself to get beat in the first place, but he did well to recover. So that's two big chances now for Dortmund in the opening 20 minutes, and then we get a third. So after Madrid basically have another attack on their end, Vidi does well to get by Ryerson, but there's no one in the box, no one to play across into. And then by the time that I think something is sent into the box, it's easily picked out by Matson. And then Brandt has a nice turn, finds Emre Can. Can gets ball to Sancho in acres of space. And then again, it's just really easy. There was no protection in the midfield. There, Camavinga and Cruz were just easily played around. And here, Sabitzer makes a run, overlapping run, and he has a cross and nearly finds Adeyemi into the box, and it's blocked last second by Valverde. But Dortmund still get a good chance out of this because the chance isn't gone. Camavinga looks to have dribbled his way out of danger, but he's caught by Matson catching up with him by surprise and blindsides him. And then from there, Matson has the vision to thread in the pass to Fulkrug in the box, and Fulkrug does everything he's supposed to. He's just unlucky. Uh, he goes to ground early. He takes the shot quickly before Courtois can come out, and he's just denied by the far post. This is really close. Maybe he's offsides. The announcers weren't really sure about it. The camera angles were tight. Possibly he is, but I do think if they adapt the new Wenger rules that they've been talking about, he would have been onside. So, and I'm a fan of that. I'm not going to get into that now. Maybe for a different discussion. But there is talks about changing the onside rules, and this is why stuff like this where he's basically even. It's not really like the attacker has necessarily an advantage or not, and basically if you're not, as long as you're not completely ahead of the attacker, if you're somewhat in front, it's okay. If you're like just a shoulder or a head in front, it's okay, and that's basically where he is. And if those rules were in place, the goal that Fulkrug actually scored in like the 85th minute would have stood as well, so it would have given us a better game. But it doesn't really matter here because he's not able to finish the chance. And I'm not going to go at him necessarily for missing the chance. I think he does everything he's supposed to do. It's not an easy chance, and he does well to go to ground. If he doesn't go to ground, it's possible Courtois can come out, and it's harder for him to get it past him. So it's just really really unfortunate and really unlucky, and unfortunate for Matson as well because people are going to remember what he did. In the second half, where his giveaway led to the Vinny goal, where he should have had an assist maybe here. So again, just Dortmund are all over Real Madrid, and just Madrid just don't really know what's hit them. And then so we have maybe a half chance here, but it basically shows kind of danger that they can produce out of nothing. So Cruz long switch ball to Vinny. Ryerson isn't tight enough. Vinny collects it with a one touch, great touch here on display, and then shifts the ball to the touchline before Ryerson can even close him down. And Vinny gets past him with ease, and he tries to square a ball to Bellingham in the box, and it's just cut out last minute by a great clearance by Schlotterbeck. He saves a goal here. And I just didn't think Bellingham offered this enough. Being in the box when Vinny was looking for any kind of cutback cross. But that said, it was an excellent run here, and it shows Bellingham can do this when he's in possession. Just too often he wasn't. He was too far behind the play, just it's just unreal. It's unreal by Vinny Jr. But it's a great ball by Tony Cruz, and you're going to see the one thing that could maybe a tip Madrid next year is not having who's going to be able to feed in the runs of Mbappe and Vinny next year, because that is what Cruz is known for. He's Mister pass it. He's Mister Distribution. Really, you can't you've never been able to press him, but really he's just. He can pick out a pass anywhere on the pitch, and and it makes so many teams play with these high lines, and he's just he's the perfect player to defeat that. And anyways, that'll be going in the board. But that said, I was kind of thinking before the second half started, Modric would have been better because Dortmund, for the most part, were fine with Tony Cruz trying to play Vinny because Vinny wasn't having any options ahead of him. Someone like a Modric maybe would have been able to do a little bit more in the final third because too often Madrid were getting into the final third and just everything was kind of stalling a little bit. Uh, but then we get to another chance for Adeyemi for Dortmund, and so here again Adeyemi gets in behind, and this is the one that I think is maybe the worst miss of basically the three. Uh, you can say maybe him the 1v1 chance where Hayden wasn't able to go around Courtois. Beating Courtois 1v1, that's hard to do, no matter what. But here, Adeyemi, I think, has a square ball. He has a square ball all day long to Fulkrug, and after he outruns Cavariol, and it's video game quickness by Adeyemi here. It's just Cavariol is basically starting. It looks like 3 or 4 yards ahead of him, and just Adeyemi just blows past him like he's not even there. It's a terrific play or feed in by I think it's Brandt. Brandt plays the ball early as well, and again Madrid's high line is exposed. Rudiger is just nowhere to be found, nowhere to help Cavariol. And here, I think Adeyemi has an easy square ball on. He just doesn't see it. I think maybe his head is just on the ball, and he does. To be fair, he does get a good shot off. Rudiger tries to chase him down, uh, and he stays with his left foot, and he does get a pretty good shot off that forces a good save by Courtois. Actually, a fantastic save because Courtois doesn't just go to ground quickly to stop it. To uh, he gets enough of it with like the spin and the bounce to also miss Fulkrug. And it's just again, it's more just misfortune for Dortmund than necessarily than anything else. I mentioned how Adeyemi had the square ball. Fulkrug was making a run alongside him, and there was no Madrid player near Fulkrug as well. I just think it's an easy square ball. Maybe Fulkrug still has to beat Courtois, but you figure he's going to have his chances. But also, when Adeyemi takes that shot, from the angle he is, and the keeper is saving it from the angle he is. Usually, it does kind of parry. All he can do is parry it in the middle of the pitch, kind of in the goal box. And Fulkrug is right there. And if this doesn't have the bounce and spin he has, Fulkrug has an easy tap in. And Fulkrug still tries to get on the end of when it bounces, and the bounce is just slightly behind him, and he can't adjust his head in time. So it's an unreal save, really, but by Courtois, and I think it's more lucky than necessarily good. But if you can't be good, be lucky, as they say. But I do think it was the wrong decision by Adeyemi as well. I think they could have had a better look at that. But and it's a shame, to a couple errors where it kind of cost the team and a couple poor decision making because. Yeah, I think it was possibly the wrong decision by Adeyemi for the 1v1 chance by not picking the other side to go around him. And so this is what Madrid are. Lady Luck again in a final or again in a knockout tie. Uh, and just Courtois is just too good. It's not fair that they have him back. They lost him at the start of the season to losing an ACL, and lo and behold, he's able to participate in the final. I think if Lunin plays, I don't know if Madrid actually win this. So Courtois is not going to get man of the match, but I think he was maybe deserving of at least a consideration. I mean, then there was another chance where Dortmund had basically a 6v3 counterattack, and again, the only thing they get is basically a Real Madrid goal kick, which is unfortunate. So just multiple times they didn't make the decisions in the final third. So here, Matson I think messes up with the original pass. He has the ball and he has everyone running in front of him, and instead he opts to go to Jadon Sancho, the only player that doesn't really want to sprint 70 yards upfield. But also, what he does there is he cuts off the rest of the field when Sancho is running on the wing. You had Brandt, you had Chan, you had I think it's even Mats Hummels in the middle. You had like six, sprinting upfield. If you keep the ball in the middle, you have all your options open. Uh, and instead, just when Sancho gets it, he's looking to immediately, switch the field. And what he does is he plays like kind of a lazy pass. It finds Brandt, and then Brandt does a one time or two to Adeyemi. But at that time, Madrid are back. Madrid have their numbers back, and Adeyemi is not able to do anything. I think he's ended, kind of shouldered off by Fernand Mendy. And this was just another chance where better decision making, being more a little I don't know how would I say I want to say not imaginative, brave, I guess. Just you're keeping the ball in the middle of the field, essentially. just making the right decision at that moment. But Matson messed up there, and I think Sancho messed up. Sancho should have tried to carry it a little bit more, not immediately trying to switch it was not the right play because the ball it took too long. For the ball to reach Brand, and it did reach Brand, but by that time, again, Madrid were able to sprint back. So uh, just lots of almost and missed opportunities for Dortmund, and you're wondering would those eventually catch up to them? And the answer, as we all know, is yes. And then I do want to say there's a mini story, I guess, around the 40th minute mark. Vinny wins a foul going to ground. Schlotterbeck is booked, but Vinny basically dives. There's no contact here, and he's already on a yellow. Yellow was soft from the Dortmund keeper. A couple minutes before this, where the Dortmund keeper dived as well. Could have been a second sending off. Vinny, I think, is lucky here, but that's probably nothing. But just little something to highlight. And then Sabitzer has a decent hit, forces Courtois save, but I think it's it's one he probably should make. It's a decent save. It's from distance, and it's a good strike by Sabitzer. But again, if he just picks his head up, I think he's got the through ball that Matson played to Fulkrug earlier. Fulkrug is wide open. There's a gap to play that pass through, and instead he opts for the Hollywood shot, and he gets it on goal. It's a good strike, but it's hard to beat Courtois. And so the halftime thoughts were Madrid certainly living on edge. And, yeah, I mean, it was 0-0, but it was really enjoyable. I mean, the technical skill on display was great. Everyone on both teams, center backs, the midfielders, even the attack, everyone outside really the keepers looked calm on the ball, looked great on it. Everyone looked like they had a great pass in them. Everyone looked like they could have a dribble. Everyone looked comfortable being pressed. There was a lot of skill on display, and both teams had the pace to hit on transitions. That's something we don't always see. At least now final is final. It's different, but usually we kind of see we don't see spaces like this. We don't see an open game at least in the first half. We usually see one team basically sitting deep, and we usually see one team having a lot of the ball, and one team usually wanting to just keep the ball. Really, not really expose themselves, and it doesn't really lead to the best contest usually. Also, when you have these elite teams like we saw with Real Madrid and Bayern, you don't really see teams figuring to press. They just want to basically man mark the passing options, and usually that doesn't lead to the best viewing either. Here, there was a contrast in styles a little bit, and Madrid had a lot of the ball, but Dortmund were doing a decent job to at least force some turnovers or at least make it hard in the final third. When they were beaten, Vidi didn't have really options to do anything either. They didn't have they didn't really have any way to kind of cross the ball in to find a Jude Bellingham. Bellingham 6'2", but at the same time, he's not necessarily a striker. He doesn't have the instincts that you want in a striker. And I thought Real Madrid were kind of getting away with or getting lucky by not opting to play with a striker, but it doesn't really work out in the end, so it doesn't really matter. But I liked the approach that Dortmund have. There was a lot of talk online that was negative because Dortmund doesn't have, I guess, the heritage or whatever. It wasn't a Bayern Munich, it wasn't a Real Madrid. I mean, it wasn't a Man City. It wasn't a just kind of naming clubs. It wasn't a PSG or Barcelona. There was a lot of that, but I liked it. I liked the brave approach that Dortmund went in with. It wasn't the same thing that we saw with Inter Milan versus Man City. Though what's funny enough is Inter actually outplayed Man City last year. But it was a nice approach. But that at the same time, I've seen the story of Real Madrid in a final before. It's been nearly every knockout game with Ancelotti, and if you don't take those chances early, it usually comes back to bite you. And again, thoroughly outplayed, but they're not down multiple goals like they maybe should have been. And the unfortunate thing was Dortmund did expend a lot of energy that first half. And I think, unlike with Man United last week, Dortmund were not being able to score in those chances. You figured it would come back to hurt them. And with Real Madrid, I was wondering things weren't working. Was it maybe Chouameni not being played? Chouameni at least would have been a little different in the sense that Tony Cruz would have had maybe a different role, but Chouameni would have been kind of the anchor. I don't think Dortmund would have had nearly as many breakaway moments as they had because Camavinga was playing a little higher up than maybe he would have wanted. The interesting though was also they were pressing high, and they were playing a high line. They had Vinny and Rodrigo trying to hound Hummels and Schlotterbeck, and Dortmund were doing well to kind of evade that pressure, doing very well to play around it. And it's not easy. No, the keeper was going long, but that was kind of it. When Schlotterbeck and Hummels were going long, they were finding teammates. They weren't just clearing the ball to clear it. They were being brave on the ball, and that's another reason why this was a good, entertaining final. Is we saw a lot of skill on the ball, really from both teams. Uh, and so that's kind of that's talking a little bit about that. Um, the things about Camavinga, like kind of leaving the space to go upfield. Again, just you lost kind of the protection, and again, Cruz can kind of spray the ball all the way he wants. But Madrid didn't really have anything to do, after that. So I was wondering, would it be better to maybe play Modric instead? And in the second half, it actually worked out that Cruz played. But Bellingham was the one that really was, the thing I was taking notes on, because he was being misused in my opinion. It's one thing to just, not play with a striker. That's fine. But Bellingham being the kind of the diamond in the midfield, kind of the head of it. Too often he was too behind to play. And again, Vinny and Rodrigo was almost anonymous as well. It's not great that he didn't necessarily have his best performance. And I was wondering if maybe he could, block out the noise with Mbappe coming up, and maybe he'd be a little more motivated or determined. And I don't know what it was, because it wasn't necessarily just him, not playing on the right side either. There'd be a few times he'd be in the middle, and he just wasn't looking to make a run. So and that's not really like him. And coming into this was kind of awkward as well, because there was some quote he gave that he said was taken out of context, where he called Man City the best club team in the world, and he's been linked to Man City for the last couple years. So that didn't necessarily play well with Madrid press, coming into the game. So it was possibly a distraction. Rodrigo played a little bit better in the second half, but he was very anonymous in the first half. And Vinny was doing decent versus Ryerson. Ryerson was holding his own, but Vinny was still beating him. But they weren't really able to make any of it count. I mean, the XG for the first half, just the first half, was Dortmund 1.85, Real Madrid point 0.3. But again, as a Liverpool fan, this kind of giving me from the PTSD from the 22 final, because again, Courtois was amazing in that game as well. And another thing too was, I thought I was watching Luis Diaz and Darwin Nunes again, making decisions for Dortmund. And so, you figured Real Madrid would surely eventually get a chance, and eventually the legs would tire out, and we basically saw both. But also there was a scare around like the 23rd minute mark, where Emre Can, kind of the main anchor in midfield, almost their kind of Tony Cruz in some respects, he had to get his knee looked at, and you're wondering, would he be able to last the full 90? So that was an issue, as well. And once he went off, I mean, the game was probably already decided anyways, but they did lose a lot of control. They moved Sabitzer in to basically be in that position, and he didn't look comfortable there. And Dortmund lost any kind of control, and after he went off, as well, and basically, Real Madrid got the second after a couple of minutes after Emre Can went off, around like the 80th minute. But the interesting thing as well was the use of Fulkrug by Dortmund. Everything was through Adeyemi, and given the chances they got, you understand. But I thought it was very weird. They were almost using him as a decoy in some respects. You don't really remember him getting on the independent crosses. Now they were able to find him in the box a couple of times, but you don't really remember any kind of cross out wide. To find him. He's 6'2". The only times that he got on the end of maybe a cross or header was one on corner kicks, outside of corner kicks. And what's funny enough is probably the one time that they did look at him to cross the ball in the second half. He had a decent header that forced a save, and he actually did score. I thought it was a little, maybe a missed opportunity to not use him a little bit more, because Ryerson, Adeyemi, Sancho, no one, they would have the ball in the wings, and just no one was looking to actually, feed it into the big man. And then Dortmund center backs, I thought, were really worth praising as well. Just what a half by Schlotterbeck and Hummels, just defensively, but also the balls that they were playing to the top. The wonderful through ball that Hummels played, the lovely ball over the top that Schlotterbeck played, and then the tactics. Already kind of talked about it with what Madsen was doing, but also Chan was almost like their Tony Cruz. So when Dortmund would have the ball and they'd be able to withstand the pressure, the first part of Madrid's kind of pressure, Chan would basically drop in and almost become the deepest center back. Really, you'd have Hummels on the wing, Schlotterbeck on the wing, and Chan was basically kind of the man dictating things from the center of the pitch, but also like kind of deep. very similar to what Tony Cruz was doing for Dortmund, and for the most part, they did a good job of keeping the ball. Now they didn't have a lot of possession, and they didn't necessarily have as many passes as Real Madrid, but it wasn't not necessarily like they played a lot of poor passes that led to turnovers, and Madrid were trying to turn them over. So, it, again, there was not a lot you could really be critical of. They did everything they were supposed to do, and it's just they weren't rewarded for it. And just the game of football is about scoring goals and nothing else, unfortunately. And yeah, it was a lot of good effort for not a lot of in product, I guess. And so we do see a bit of a change though in the second half. So here we have we mentioned how he was unique, how they were using Valverde in the first half. So they tucked him inside. In the second half, basically he almost formed a box midfield four, and it was like him, Bellingham, and Cruz and Camavinga. And it almost looked like they were trying to outnumber Dortmund 4-3 there. So here Valverde gets ball, tries to cross, no one's there. Dortmund defended, but then countered well, and full quick drops deep for the ball, almost kind of doing what a bit like what Brighton used to do with like Evan Ferguson. He does like a bit of a wall pass to go around a defender to play in Adeyemi. Adeyemi has a nice run again, and then he has a long switch ball to find Sancho, and Sancho does well to win a corner kick. So you're thinking Dortmund are actually starting off the first half, the second half, like they finished the first half, and then you see things completely change because Dortmund have a chance to maybe score on the corner kick, and it's not the best delivery, and basically it leads to Madrid being able to counter. Vinny Jr. does amazing, basically makes a 70-yard sprint, and then he's got again no one with him, and so he's got to hold on to the ball, and he's got to find a way to at least hold on to it to allow people to catch up. And what he does is he's able to draw a foul. He does a very good job drawing the foul. So it's a free kick. Tony Cruz the free kick. It's a good free kick. It's going into the top corner, requires a save, and basically Madrid get a cheap corner kick of themselves out of this. And what does Madrid do with the corner kick that Dortmund weren't able to do? Well, Tony Cruz has the delivery, and he whips the ball into kind of the near post, and the shortest player on the pitch is Daniel Carvajal, and he gets the ball first and flicks the head at it, and he just misses from sneaking into the top corner. This is the warning shot. This is do a bookmark here, or do kind of the screen cap at least in your memory, because this was basically we get to see this again. And so it just missed high, and but you saw this could be a problem. The delivery was just perfect. Carvalho made a run, and he out jumps Fulkrug. It shouldn't happen. Carvajal is I think they said like 5'7". Maybe he's 5'8" or 5'9". Fulkrug though is 6'2". This should not happen, and he just it's the mix of running to the ball. Carvalho knows where the ball is going to go, so he always has that kind of advantage. They do a little pick play as well, but it's just it's the delivery and the consistency that Cruz is able to whip this in, because it's got the spin, it's got the right height. It's not one of those looping ones where the keeper can necessarily go out to get to it. It's just perfect. It's perfectly hit, and Cruz and I guess maybe Carvalho made a little nod to each other saying let's do it again. And basically they do. Couple minutes later, 10 minutes later, and then we have a chance here. Vinny cross to Bellingham. Rodrigo, basically Vinny crosses to Bellingham and Rodrigo. Yeah, they both actually make a run into the middle. There's no one there, but Carvalho is also on the back post, and this needs a save as well. So that Madrid are starting to actually create some chances here, and this happens because finally Bellingham and Rodrigo both are in the box. So Vinny is able to actually look for them, and we finally see a cross into the box, and it nearly finds, basically, I think Bellingham actually, heads it backwards, maybe unintentionally. Carvalho's at the back post, and he gets a shot. And basically, I think what happens is Ian Matson actually blocks it, and then the block nearly fumbles, messes with the keeper. But Carvalho already has the two best chances for Madrid in the game. And so here, so this is happening around like the started the second half, and then from about like minute 55 to 65, I have Madrid being out of sorts, and they can't seem to keep possession. Dortmund are flying at the ball, creating turnovers, but again, this is kind of sapping the energy out because they're not scoring out of this, and they do finally get a good chance for here. Adeyemi to Fulkrug. Finally, a decent ball is whipped into him. I was wondering, why aren't you crossing the ball into him more? And unfortunately, it's just the header that Fulkrug has is just too central to cause Courtois problems. But Brandt here does enough to finally gap behind between like Valverde. He gets behind him, gets ball in the turn after a throw in, immediately plays it out wide to Adeyemi. And it's a nice kind of disguised run by Sabitzer as well. So Sabitzer, runs into the box, and that draws Nacho's attention. And Fulkrug is wide open, back post, and it's a right cross. It's a great delivery by Adeyemi, so he can obviously cross it in. And Fulkrug gets all the power and all the power you would want. It's a good header. It's too central for Courtois. It's a pretty easy save. Uh, but after that, that's kind of the last real opportunity that Dortmund had. Madrid really wake up after that. So here we have Vinny Jr. crossing it to Bellingham again. This nearly sneaks in. So Dortmund finally play across into the box, and Madrid basically move it upfield. Vinny gets the ball. Mendy here makes a run ahead, and that draws someone to run off Vinny, and then Vinny cuts inside, and he loops the perfect ball into the box. And it nearly finds Bellingham, but it also nearly fools Kobel, the Dortmund keeper. And it's a terrific run by Bellingham, and I think it's a good weight of the cross on Vinny Jr. And I think Bellingham maybe whiffs on this. He can maybe do better here to score because any kind of contact, it's probably getting past the keeper. But you're starting to see these uh-ohs. You're starting to see the legs run out for Dortmund, and so Terzic, goes for the Hail Mary. He subs off Adeyemi for Marco Reus, and I don't know if the idea was sentiment. Give the player that's leaving a little more one last hurrah. I wasn't necessarily against Marco Reus coming on. I didn't like it coming on for Adeyemi. Now maybe Adeyemi was completely spent, but it wasn't once Adeyemi went off, there went the one player with legs in your side. I thought Sancho could have been taken off, or you could have taken off Brandt, played Sancho through as a 10. I didn't really love this because Adeyemi was the one threatened behind, and once he was gassed, but once you lost him, it wasn't the same. You moved Sancho to the left. Sancho wasn't running off attacking Carvajal either. He was kind of looking for the ball with his feet, and once he's doing that, he's kind of just running in. That's allowing Madrid to. That's playing into what Madrid want, basically. They had the midfield cluttered. What they didn't want was ball over the top for Carvajal to defend, or for Rudiger to get behind. And the change also, what happened was you have Royce that moved to the right side, but he wasn't really playing as a wing either. He was playing through the middle. And so Nacho was able to deal with them. So you allowed Mendy to kind of have a free run as well. And just the shape and everything just changed with that sub, and I didn't like it. Uh, and then you have basically the game changing here. So Madrid get a corner kick out of nothing because Vinny Jr. just goes past Mats Hummels. I think another lovely ball over the top, either by Nacho or by Tony Cruz, and they find Vinny Jr. again. And then no, what happens is Valverde actually has a dribble and then finds Vinny. But what happens here is just unreal touch to nutmeg Ryerson on the byline after getting by Hummels, and then Hummels kicks it out of bounds. Uh, it's just Vinny Jr.'s uh, close contact or close control on the ball with pace is unique. We haven't seen stuff like this. People are going to say Messi and whatnot. It's a different kind of close control. Uh, because we saw this on display versus Bayern Munich as well, and it's just he can. It seems like he can toast anyone that's guarding him. And only 22, maybe he's 23 now. Yeah, he's about to be a problem because he's starting to add some goals and end product to his game as well. And he's going to with someone like Mbappe, as it's going to be hard to man mark either both of them. But basically, so that's what happens. They get a corner kick out of nothing because of this. It's a disgusting little nutmeg that it does on Ryerson. And so the first thing though is the first corner kick is defended. Now Rudiger looks like he probably could have scored on this too. But it is headed well or defended well, at least somewhat. It looks like Dortmund are going to escape, and then Sancho either takes too long of the ball or has a bad touch. They don't clear it when they could have. If Sancho gets the ball first, all he has to do is clear it away. Uh, but at that time they were kind of under siege, and maybe he wanted to keep possession. Maybe they wanted to do a little counter themselves. And here they lose it, and then Valverde immediately takes a shot, and that deflects. I think Ian Matson tries to try to block it, and it deflects out for another corner kick. So it's a cheap one to give away, and they get punished for it. So here it's the 72nd minute. It's the one that Carvajal scores. And it's so painful because it was obvious that it was so easy to see coming, and it was a cheap one to give away. And it's the same play from earlier where Carvajal just beats his marker. It's full quick again, and he just gets the flick on, and he gets it right this time. And Dortmund looked had the warning shot earlier. It's a terrific ball again by Tony Cruz, and again his set piece delivery was spot on. And it did feel coming, but also it was fitting that fitting that it came from Carvajal, the player that really did get most of the big chances, in the game even before this, and it just you wouldn't have expected. I think they said he scored maybe once the entire season, and so there you go. They call him Mr. Madrid because he's been he's one of the more older sides in the team. He's been there for all 6 times that they've won it. Basically, he started pace for all 6. He was very good, in the 22 final versus Liverpool. I do remember that. Uh, and there you go. Just, they get the goal that just you wouldn't have expected to come from him, but it was fitting the way that the game was going. And then that just you just kind of sunk in your seat if you were rooting for Dortmund at that point. Madrid at that point start winning every 50-50 ball again. Dortmund just can't escape the pressure. There's no ball over the top. Royce aren't making runs. Sancho's not. Brandt not. Brandt's on the wing. Fulkrig is nowhere to be seen as well. And just you know, Dortmund having the ball, and there's just there's nothing to do but boot it upfield and just give the ball away. They can't keep it, and the chances start coming as well from Madrid. So here we have Camavinga just cut back across to Bellingham. It's created by Vinny dropping, and it's confusing. It's confusing to Ryerson. Vinny drops, and then he plays Camavinga making a run ahead of him. Camavinga gets to the byline, has a beautiful cutback ball into the box, and Bellingham has a chance to clinch it. Versus former club in England in Wembley. That could have been a storyline as well. And the only reason he doesn't, I thought it was a miss at first, but the only reason he doesn't, it's an unreal tackle in the box by Schlotterbeck. He saves a goal here. Saves maybe at that point the tie. It's 78th minute. It's still only a 1-0 game, and this is a goal game saving a tackle. He gets enough of the ball to block it to get it just a little wide. Otherwise, Bellingham's finding the corner. Absolutely, he's sliding this away. So there was that chance, and then more Dortmund changes. We have Chan being subbed off for Daniel Malin, and then Brandt off for Haller. So they go for 2 strikers, kind of change the shape a little bit, 4-2-4. But without Chan, they lost their anchor, and they lost their composer. Sabitzer is the lone 6. Just that he's not a DM, not really. You understand, kind of. You have to go for it. You have to be brave, but it didn't work out. And so here we have another chance where Camavinga shot forces a save, but it's right after the changes. Dortmund immediately give the ball away. So that shows you something. I mean, Dortmund just can't do anything with the ball at this point. The Even with new legs on the pitch, the likes of Mendy, Nacho, Camavinga are just timing their tackles to perfection. They're winning the ball back. Dortmund just didn't look like they were going to score, and then this kind of seals it at what happens here. So the announcer called it, tired body, tired mind. It just kind of led to this, in my opinion. Matson gets the ball. I think it's like a Dortmund or Real Madrid throw in. Matson gets the ball that just escapes. He plays a pass that escapes Slotterbeck, and it's just a mix of a poor pass. It's maybe just too far ahead in front. It's poor communication. Slotterbeck's not ready for it. Slotterbeck's maybe lazy. He doesn't have the legs to go chase it. Either way, it's a problem. Bellingham is able to just get to the ball easily, and then he makes the right pass. He's got Vinny on his left side wide open because Ryerson at that point has left to help out and be part of the attack. He's not expecting Dortmund to lose the ball, and it's not really like Matson's being pressed or anything. He just makes the wrong pass or the wrong decision, and him and Schlotterbeck really. And then he gets the ball in the box, and he has the first touch to collect himself, and then he's able to slot it away with his left foot. Uh, and it's not that much different from the chance that Adeyemi had. Now maybe he scuffs the finish a little bit, but it's all about finishing, and he is able to flick it over. He is enough to just get enough height to go over the keeper. He can't keep it out, and it felt like a turning point in in world football. Really, legacy defining. He's already scored two Champions League finals at 23. He's starting to build an impressive goal resume as far as the knockout phases of the Champions League. Now, uh, he's mostly played on the wing, and you don't really expect someone that plays out wide to get Messi and Ronaldo numbers. And I think people are starting to talk about that. I've seen people saying, "Oh, the game is gone if Vinny wins the Ballon d'Or because uh, he wouldn't have even sniffed it with Ronaldo and Messi when they were playing." That's possibly true, but it's a different player playing a different position. It's not easy to get 20 goals, playing out wide. That's just not something you normally see. Normally, the wide player creates, for an attacker, and for the most part, Vinny and Messi and Ronaldo were playing through the middle. Everything was going through them. So that's the reason why they scored all their goals. Uh, so I think we need to have that into context, I guess I can say, but also what he's doing is impressive, as a wide man or even as a forward to get a number of his goals in the knockout phases of the Champions League when that's usually the, the, when the competition is the most the competition is the highest. It is something to warrant, and we're gonna see him in the summertime. We don't know if this Champions League run will take out of the legs or not, but he's going to be the main face for Brazil in the Copa America, and Brazil. The two favorites are Brazil and Argentina. Funny enough, and we possibly could have gotten that in the World Cup. This in 22 had Brazil not gotten knocked out by Croatia. So we got the final 4 years ago or 3 years ago, as well. It was Brazil and Argentina. Messi and Di Maria were able to win that one, and now Argentina, everyone knows, is the World Cup holders as well. So Brazil are going to look into this as something they need to perform in, and Vinny Jr. is going to be you expect to probably be the star, the face of that tournament, coming into it. Messi's going to play in it, but Vinny is probably going to be the one everyone's going to look at to see what he does. So that's kind of just where it ends. I mean, after that, all the drama kind of ended. There was a chance that Volkrig was able to score on. It's called off though for offsides. It's finally a ball like whipped in. It's a good ball whipped in by Malin, but I just didn't think they did that enough. I don't think they looked for Volkrig enough. You played with a striker. You opted to, and you didn't really use him. You almost used him as a kind of a decoy. And Madrid didn't play with a striker, and in the second half, I thought Bellingham was doing better to be in the box a little bit more, and I thought that actually, that helped led to it changing, the second half changing, because that is the story. The story is the first half and the second being different. So, and I do think one thing to kind of start off with is there is a saying in European football where if Real Madrid make it to a European final, they don't lose it, and there's a reason for that saying. I do think, Dortmund had the right idea, but it was very similar again to the 2022 final with Liverpool and Real Madrid. Both teams have similar approaches, and Vinny and Adeyemi with the outballs. Dortmund played with a striker, and you thought that was maybe going to be the difference, and it wasn't. But I do like this because as a manager, you need to make a decision. Do you go out the bricks quickly, try to get an opening goal, try to set the get tempo early, or do you sit back and conserve your energy for the second half? Klopp's kind of like that. Klopp likes going out, flying out of the blocks for finals. And it took a while for him to actually win some finals. But towards the end, I think it was 6 for his last 7 in winning finals. So it's not necessarily like this is a losing strategy. But you do have to score by that, or you need to have a bench because your legs are going to be sapped eventually. And by the team that is kind of sitting back, uh, it just kind of plays into their hard cards a little bit as long as the game is still in the balance. The team with the better players you expect is probably going to win it out, and that is what happened. Uh, and so let's see. Another thing too is the way that Bayern's Musiala and Sane, got at Madrid, and watching Adeyemi, get his chances. I do kind of wonder, had PSG been able to get past Dortmund, would Mbappe and PSG actually gotten their first Champions League and actually beaten the team he would have been about to join? Watching the way this kind of played out, I do think Real Madrid maybe got lucky that they were facing Dortmund and not someone like PSG. But it doesn't really matter. That's not really how the game works. And another thing too, at least it wasn't another boring near 1-0 like a lot of finals have been. We did get 2 goals. The 3 big chances for Dortmund as well. 13 shots for both teams, but 11 for Real Madrid came in the second half. So that kind of says it as well. Real Madrid with majority of possessions, what you would imagine. 500 passes, the majority of passing for Real Madrid as well, 92% accuracy. Dortmund with 334, 45 with 86% accuracy. So that's good pass accuracy for both teams. But the interesting thing is Madrid only had 200 passes in that second half. So fewer passes, but I think they were a little bit more direct and threatening in their attack as well. So that kind of says it as well. So to get started with Real Madrid, the funny thing is this was supposed to be the season they didn't win it. All those ACL injuries to start the season, Courtois, Eder Militao, Arda Güler, who they brought in as kind of a more kind of a look to the future kind of player. Though he started to shine for them towards the end of the season. We're going to see him for Turkey in the Euros. Uh, the Militao injury left them light at left back. They had Alaba, who was injured most of the season as well, so you had to step in Nacho and Tchouaméni. Tchouaméni had a couple really good defensive performances at center back, and of course he did. He that player is a do it all kind of player, and I'm still a little peeved that Liverpool weren't able to sign him in 22. And it's just they were waiting on Mbappe. Everyone's known about that, and they never replaced Benzema. They lose Benzema. Who cares? And you thought they were just going to kill out the season, really. And they brought in 34-year-old Hasselu on a loan, and he saved them when it counted versus Bayern Munich. It's just that part. You people talk about black magic, luck. There's something to it. Players maybe just buy into the whole mentality thing. They buy into an entitlement maybe, but it's not entitled if you earn it. And Hasselu saved them with Bayern Munich when he shouldn't have been. So we could have seen an all German final with Dortmund and Bayern like we saw in 2013 if not for Hasselu. Um, and then of course after the winning it, then they go ahead and announce that they have signed Mbappe, and again, it looks like they're looking at Alfonso Davies and Yeni Euro of Lille is apparently highly linked as well, and it's just that's what they do. Even after winning, that is what they built up the squad. They did it with Tchouaméni. They won the 22 final, and then they signed Tchouaméni. Uh, and when they already had Camavinga, they already had Casemiro. And it's just this is what a club that wins is supposed to. I remember when Liverpool won the Champions League, they didn't do that. They signed Thiago, and that was kind of it. And just the way that they built up the squad, they brought in Bellingham last year. No one really knew how he was going to fit in as well. And Ancelotti just kind of made him the head of the midfield diamond, and he got like 20 goals for them. I think it's his highest goal scoring tally as well. And if not for Vinny Jr., had Bellingham actually made made that goal count with Schlotterbeck instead of Schlotterbeck blocking it. I'm curious if people would have been trying to push him maybe for Ballon d'Or instead. I think it would have been rubbish. I do think the entire team went through Vinny Jr.'s legs, but I do think that would have been at least close. Bellingham, I think, did outdo him for goals. Most of them were kind of tap ins. You don't really remember Bellingham having a lot of big moments in the knockout rounds where you do remember just everything ran through Vinny in the games that mattered. But I do think that would have been close. He's probably going to get second or third shouts. Uh, and then also you have Endrick. You have Endrick, a 16 or 17-year-old Endrick of Brazil, who's already scored in a senior game at Wembley versus England. So he's probably going to be someone that everyone's going to know. If not, I don't know if he'll feature for the Copa America. Well, he probably will. Uh, he's probably going to be what people know in just in a few years' time. And I imagine as long as he's able to progress, not deal with an injury. By the time the World Cup happens in 2 years in America, people are going to know who Endrick is. So they're going to have him as well to fit around. So that is so that you have this Galacticos team, and you think maybe a weakness of theirs would they be soft. Maybe these millionaires on these wages. Maybe these guys wake up and all of their uh, you know, eh, just everything is just pressed clean and uh, it, what I'm trying to say is you would just think maybe a weakness would be is you could maybe get at them a little bit physically and just everything other than maybe Cruz, pretty boring Cruz. Everyone is relentless without the ball. Just even when they're sitting back in a block, they when you get into a zone that they define, they run in the zone. They're amazing surrounding the ball, putting their bodies on the line to win it back. Valverde, Camavinga, even Jude, Rudiger, Tchouaméni when he plays, even Vinny and Rodrigo do unbelievable work rate without the ball. You get great work rate from their star players, and it's just what they built up is crazy. Um, so uh, so how did this happen? What kind of tactics would they do? Cruz kind of dropping back to be the back lines. You weren't really able to turn them over. Dortmund didn't really care about that, but they did press high. They did try to do it. They tried to have their cake and eat it too, as they say. Dortmund were trying to press high, but they also weren't really giving a whole lot of space in behind. They didn't have like Hummels or Schlotterbeck on the touchline. They were giving him a little space, so their defenders had to do a lot of work in midfield to cover up that gap. But they were able to do it, at least in the first half. There's just a lot of running by Brandt and Sabitzer, and maybe not necessarily Chan, but Sancho was kind of cutting in and doing some pretty good defensive work. They were Fulkrug. They were using Fulkrug to actually kind of play a little further back to at least help out. So they did a decent job at least to make the midfield as compact as they possibly could. Real Madrid are kind of doing something similar with Bellingham. They're making him an extra midfielder, part of the diamond. But I do think that was hurting them more than helping. Uh, and just kind of the positives is Carvajal. I think Courtois was maybe man of the match before he scored. But funny enough is as I mentioned it before, he was kind of their most involved attacker even before the goal, so it was fitting in that respect as well. Courtois is not fair. That they signed him after the year that they lost, the summer they lost Ronaldo. They went to Chelsea and signed Courtois, and it was kind of weird because they did it at a time when the game was moving toward keepers that were good with the ball at their feet, and Courtois has never been that. And it was seen as maybe they were making a mistake, and not only did they not make a mistake, they probably did sign the best shot stopper in the game, and he just continues to do that time and time again. He recovers from an ACL injury, and he's able to play in a final because, of course, I think it saved him. I really do. I don't know if Lunin would be able to make those saves. Uh, and then Vinny Jr., all he did was 8 of 13 dribbles, 12 of 20 ground duels. And he probably is the Ballon d'Or favorite. Uh, and I do think one thing to kind of say, too, is it'll be a nice moment because, one, it'll kind of signal a change under the guard in some respects, but it's done by a player that Madrid brought in and developed. He was raw when he came to Madrid, regardless of how much they spent for him. He was raw. And you look at the first few seasons in La Liga, he had 3 goals, and then he had 3 goals again in, I think, 2020 season, and then in 2021, he explodes for 17 goals, and all he does is he wins the Champions League final for them as a 21-year-old. And so I think the fun thing about it is they've brought him in and they've allowed him to have freedom to make mistakes. Ancelotti didn't turn him into a robot the way that maybe Arteta has done with Saka, or Martinelli, or Pep's done with Grealish. And he's a player with loads of flair. He loves taking people on. He has tricks, all in his bag. He's got power and pace, and he's developed into a cool finisher, cool 1v1 finisher. And yeah, he's a standout player in the Champions League as well. And another thing too is if he does kind of win the Ballon d'Or this year, the backstory in all this will be him kind of overcoming a little. I want to say adversity. That's the wrong word for it, but him having to overcome a lot of nonsense. Essentially, in Spain, he's had to deal with a lot of racist incidents over the last 2 years, where fans were seen either mocking a lynching, or doing lots of guerrilla chants, lots of racist chants, and La Liga has not done anything to protect him, which has been really disgusting, to be honest. And all he's done is it started with him dancing. People didn't like him dancing for some reason, and he is just kind of taking that on his chin. And it's something should still be done with it. I'm not saying it's good that he's ignored it, but it's just he's had to overcome that as well. So it's another kind of triumph to what he's been able to overcome as well. And then with Camavinga, I just don't really know what he is. It doesn't necessarily feel like he's a holder. He's brilliant on the ball. He can do it. He can do it all, and he's just so skilled technically. He's physically imposing as well, and it's annoying that they were able to do this without Tchouaméni. They didn't even need him. And Camavinga had a good. There were a couple times when maybe Adeyemi was able to get in behind. They were able to make some runs in behind him, where the protection wasn't really there in front of the back line. But at the same time, he was incredible in the second half. It didn't feel like he lost a challenge in the second half, and the amount of ground he can cover. When he gets the ball, he turns. There were a couple of times when he got played the ball in some really bad areas, and just the touch that he had, the close control that he had, it is absolutely bonkers. And he's still quite young as well. They bought him in when he was 17, and he's still maybe 22. He's and you don't even what do you do with Tchouaméni? I do wonder if maybe the idea is to maybe try him at center back because he's 6'4". He kind of think is 6'2". Tchouaméni, I think, is 6'4", and I do think Tchouaméni is a better kind of holding kind of, defensive midfielder, but that's what he is. He's a defensive midfielder or maybe a center back in a high line. He's not someone that is more all around. Camavinga can play anywhere. Uh, the only thing to kind of touch on is the team did feel gettable. Not playing with a striker, and it just that didn't show up. Maybe the last thing to touch on is the one maybe negative is Rodrigo. I was wondering in the preview episode, could would maybe Rodrigo kind of be a storyline? Because all this talk is about Mbappe and Vinny, and maybe the focus wouldn't be on him. I was wrong on that. The focus was entirely on him because of the comments he made, and he looked out of place. He's never been really a right winger. I don't know where he fits going forwards. The Man City comments definitely didn't seem to show up because he didn't. There were a couple times when he was played through the middle or even on the left, and he just wasn't able to do anything. I think he had one successful dribble, and he was able to get by someone on nearly near the byline, got to the byline, had a good cutback cross, but he had one successful dribble for like over out of 9 attempts. He didn't really win any duels or any challenges. I don't remember him doing anything defensively. There were a couple of times when Carvalho was getting outrun. You never really saw Rodrigo coming back to help out with Adeyemi as well. It's not like he did a lot of work defensively. He didn't have his mind right. And you do wonder going forward, what are they going to do with him? Because he, in my opinion, it would probably be better to play someone that is preferred on the right side than necessarily someone that wants to also play on the left. So do you think about moving him? To be honest, and if you did, lots of teams would absolutely welcome Rodrigo. I'm a Liverpool supporter. I'm trying to think of Rodrigo versus instead of Luis Diaz, and yeah, my eyes light up with that idea. Uh, Man City's been linked to him for a long time. You can see where that worked out would work out well as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. He's going to have an important Copa. We'll see if maybe that this will spark him to have a good Copa. And so where can we start? And they've just added Mbappe. And one thing I have said, I was wondering for the longest time, how would they make this work? Both play on the left, but then watching the final, the amount of times that Vinny would get the ball, and there would just be no one ahead of him. There's not going to be that issue with Mbappe, so they're going to be fluid as hell on transition. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and they get Davies as well. How do you stop that three-head monster on the left side? It doesn't matter if they're fully left-sided biased. They'll be able to they'll be able to do anything they want. So it'll be maybe they need to improve a little bit as far as the center back. I don't necessarily know if Nacho will be able to handle, if Davies basically is a kind of a another kind of attacker, because they could be maybe vulnerable at least for counters on that side. But that is potentially what we're looking at, and if nothing else, it'll be a fun team to play with on FIFA. But here, I want to touch on what my friend brought up is as far as an interesting point, like a side story in all this, and see how we're doing for time. Um, it could be worse. All right, so Ancelotti, is brought in. He gets 2 out of the last 3 years. Madrid look to dominate, football now. But it wasn't that long ago. Go back to 2015. It didn't feel like people would have assumed this. People would have thought Barcelona would be the team that would go on to dominate for the next few years, and we haven't seen them since 2015. So why is that? How did Barcelona fumble the bag? And Madrid and Barcelona both lost Messi and Ronaldo around the same time. Madrid lost Ronaldo a little bit earlier, but within 3 or 4 years of each other. And one club has definitely found it easier to move on. So how did this happen? One way also is Madrid did strike gold by putting loads of promise on these 2 young Brazilians, and one's about to become the face of football. But it's not just that. Mr. Super League himself, Perez, is the answer. They've been run differently. Real Madrid have been run better than Barcelona's. Now, regardless of whether or not the politics of it allow Perez to have a little bit more say, or maybe it's the reverse, and Barcelona's board has been is influenced in politics and other stuff. But that is a lot of it. Barcelona was run very poorly by Josep Maria Bartomeu, and then because he mishandled Messi's contract and wages, and then yeah, the one they brought in, Laporta, hasn't necessarily improved things. So that's kind of the story. So first, I'm going to get started with Barcelona, and so they bring in first they brought in Neymar to pair with Messi, and they already had Suarez, and they win their third Champions League, beating Juventus in 2015, and this becomes kind of the last time Barcelona makes the finals. And so what did happen? And so before that, I think is key. So what happens here is they lost Thiago Alcantara, 22-year-old genius, to join Pep and Bayern at Bayern Munich, and they lost him for nearly nothing. I think 22 million, and it's because they didn't play him enough games in his final year of his contract, and so something was able to trigger where Bayern Munich was able to get him for really really cheap, and so you lost basically your most obvious Iniesta placement. Basically they lost the next great Barcelona midfielder for nothing, and then they screwed up Neymar's release clause. And when PSG activated it in August of 2017, these dates are important as well. They didn't immediately identify Mbappe. So what they did is they had a release clause of like 180 million, which understandably you figured no club's gonna be able to afford that, no way. And then PSG with their ownership and different money bags were like, we want to make a statement by being the owners of this club. We want to really sign the best of the best, and basically they picked Neymar as that player. And at that time, you understood it. You also understood that at that time, Neymar didn't enjoy being in Messi's shadow, and so there was a chance there, and PSG were able to step up and take it. And Barcelona were caught flat-footed. Now they got a lot of money, but everyone knew that they had a lot of money, and so the problem is anyone they identified had an extra 20 million attached to it or whatever it was. It was almost like transfer inflation, and the problem was not identifying the proper player to replace Neymar. And the most at 2017, I knew who Mbappe was. Everyone did. Oh, anyone that had followed the Champions League, because Mbappe had already had his Monaco stretch, and just he was right there. He was right there, and they didn't identify him. And then what happened in so that was August of 2017. What does PSG do in September of 2017? Oh, they go ahead and sign Mbappe. So and what did Barcelona do? So they instead they overspent on Dembele of Dortmund. I think they paid like 145 million for him, and then later on they looked at Coutinho as basically being because he was Brazilian. They looked at him as being the second face of the I guess Brazilian team national team going forward. At that time, Coutinho had been absolutely spectacular for Liverpool, but it wasn't the same kind of player. Coutinho was not the take on individual dribble beast. He was someone that really enjoyed Sadio Mane's runs. He was someone that really enjoyed kind of playing in the half spaces. He was basically what Nessie more. He was a 10, and they brought him in. They overpaid for him as well, and it just wasn't like for like. And so you screwed up there. But after that, you start to see the club has financial troubles, and you start to see really bonkers stuff that almost looks like money laundering, really, or just like financial gimmicks to make it seem like the books look better than they did. So they have the Pjanic and Arthur transfer of in 2020, and it was just it didn't make sense at the time because why are you giving your Arthur to Juventus to bring in Pjanic? It didn't. It again. It still doesn't really make sense. Other than it was just book nonsense. But at that year, they also lost Mark Cucurella to Getafe for 11 million, and then they lost Jan Tadibo, a guy that I've been raving about for the last few years. They lost him for 2 million after a successful loan. So you're starting to see the roster not being kept up well. And then COVID happens. It saps all the stadium revenue that they were expected to rely on. They're already in massive debt, and they've been forced to paper over cracks and swing for the fences ever since. And another thing too is I don't get why they didn't. There was no reason for them to lose Rodri to Man City. He was the clear Sergio Busquets replacement, in my opinion, and not replacing Busquets be before the time was too late was fatal because possibly fatal more than losing Messi because the style of the 4-3-3 that they play is so reliant on a single pivot player that recognizes the position, the positional awareness of that formation, and it's you also need someone to be just amazingly gifted on the ball to do it. and Rodri was the most obvious replacement. That's why Pep went out and got him. He was on Atletico Madrid. I knew who Rodri was on Atletico Madrid before he went to Man City, and it's just again, it's just not seeing that. Obviously, anyone that would have been watching Spain even then, when Busquets wasn't playing, it was already Rodri at that time, and not seeing that was not having keeping Rodri in La Liga, and not realizing this is someone that just it just made all the sense in the world, and not doing it was fatal. Uh, and Barcelona haven't been able to respond, losing Busquets, because Busquets lost his pace, but also his final season before he left, he was brilliant for them as well, and they haven't been able to do it. They brought in the guy that they brought in was Frankie De Jong, and he struggled. He struggled in that kind of situation because you can't hold and leave. And Frankie De Jong likes dribbling with the ball. He likes carrying it, and it's different. And the way that they've been playing, the quote unquote Barcelona way that they've been playing for 2 decades, it's arguable that is the most important position in that formation, in that kind of system. And it's just wild how they've never really looked at it to replace him. The other player that makes sense to me now is Martin Zubimendi of Sociedad, and I don't think they've been linked to him. But also, Barcelona doesn't really have money to make a lot of these signings now, so uh, that is surprising a little bit as well. But also, they spent so many years not improving the back line, and I think one thing I'm going to argue is I think they signed the wrong Ajax player in 2019. So they brought in Frankie De Jong. Frankie De Jong is a brilliant player, but again, outside of a system change, so I think the player that was equally talked up from that Champions League was Mateus de Ligt. And I think it probably made more sense at the time, probably more sense in hindsight. You probably should have signed him instead. He instead went to Juventus, and maybe that's maybe he would have had the same issues because his career hasn't really kicked off the way that people would have expected. He has had some injury issues as well. Maybe he struggles a little bit in a high line. He struggled a little bit with Bayern in that kind of situation, but he's really gifted on the ball, and they haven't had defensive help. They overplayed Gerard Piqué for so many years because of that. They never really had the defensive center back security, and so I think they got I think they messed up there, but also they got screwed by Umtiti. They had this French player who looked a real threat. He was starring for them in the 2018 World Cup. He was that good, but the problem is he had been dealing with injuries that entire year, and then going against his doctor wishes, he played in that World Cup, and basically he just ruined himself permanently. And they were never able to really get the best out of him again. And I do think they waited too long to replace Gerard Piqué, the opposite of Madrid. So just all that time, they never as they got aged, the roster aged out. They never were able to replace the back line. Jody Alba as well kind of aged out. Busquets aged out. You had Messi who was aging, and they just didn't see. They did the opposite of what Madrid were doing. They started to paper over cracks, and there was a period where they started to finally bring players in that they had been targeting forever, but it just felt it was timed wrong. It was the wrong fit, the wrong time. Players like Griezmann, they brought in the likes of Luke De Jong. They brought back Adama Traore, which worked in spurts, and they signed Sergio Aguero, who I don't even think kicked a ball for them. He had a heart scare, had to retire, he had knee issues even before that. Then they brought in Memphis Depay, Aubameyang. So this is, and they in the last, and since then they brought in Robert Lewandowski, and just everything is about kind of what can you do for me now, and paying for people that are already kind of the finished product. So it wasn't working what they were doing, and then another thing too is they weren't bringing in players that Messi needed to complement his game. Maybe Adama Traore is close to that, just with the runs that he can offer, because at that point Messi didn't press and didn't do anything out of possession. Didn't exactly have a lot of pace at that time either. He needed other people ahead of him to play off of, and it's the opposite of Coutinho. It's the opposite of Griezmann. The opposite of Memphis Depay. And so, who all of those players like to play in the half spaces, final third players as well. And so Barca never really had a way to outside of maybe Dembele. Dembele was always injured. So there was finally that one season when Dembele was able to play, where I think it was finally Messi's like final season. You started to see this kind of work a little bit, and Messi had a fantastic last season for them. But it was a little too late, and then Messi leaves, and so Barcelona out, Laporte in. And so what does Laporte do? After losing Messi, he kind of swings for the fences. They have a wage bill that they can't even like play or sign players, and they get an exception by La Liga. And then they overspend like mad. They bring in Robert Lewandowski, Frank Kessie of AC Milan, Rafinha of Leeds, Jules Koundé of Sevilla, and a who's who of Chelsea defenders. Basically on free. So the Christensen, who now is maybe their DM, and then Marcos Alonso. And then they spent big on João Felix and Cancelo on loans. But again, all these players are coming from big clubs, either past their prime or kind of the starlight of it. And there's not much room for growth or error here. And another story here is the coaches that they brought in. So that's the player side. Now we'll talk about the coaches. The first I'm going to speak about is Valverde. So it may be the red pen and a bunch of blue or black pens, but with Valverde, you see a change in how they played. He seemed to recognize they couldn't really play this 4-3-3 shape. They needed to be a little more pragmatic. They needed to play a 4-4-2. Maybe play Messi a little further ahead of the ball because when Messi's always going to drop for it, and when he does, he needs to have someone ahead of him. And it wasn't, apparently it wasn't the Barcelona that people had come to know and recognize. And apparently the fans didn't love it either. They didn't love seeing a different game. But what's funny about that is he seemed to recognize they needed to change to get them back. And funny enough, is with Valverde is the closest that they've come. And if not for that magical night at Anfield, he would have got them in the Champions League final. And they would have played Pochettino Spurs. Now, it's still the EPL club. It's still a high intensity, pressing Spurs side. But Barcelona also beat Spurs in the group stages earlier that year. That's something I completely forgot about that my friend brought up with me recently. So they probably would have been favored to even win that final in 2019. So they were close, and for some reason they didn't. They shipped out Valverde. He seemed to recognize you can't just be a midfield of superior technical players without that physical component anymore. And that was one thing that they were lacking. And then out goes Valverde to bring in Kike Setien, someone from Raul Betis at that time, and they got back to playing their pretty football. And this was during the COVID year. They played Bayern Munich in an empty stadium, and they get roasted 8-2 in the next year. Funny enough, by Hansi Flick, who now is about to be their coach. And then in comes Ronald Koeman, who had some success with the Netherlands team. You figured this would probably be the perfect person to bring in to make Frankie de Jong kind of his focal point. And what's funny enough is he doesn't play Frankie de Jong. There starts to be a weird kind of vibe there. But also, Messi finally had a brilliant season, and it was finally when they were able to play with Dembele. But that's the last season that they had with him. And so where did they go from there? And then they bring in Xavi Hernandez, who actually wins La Liga in the first year, and he starts to integrate the La Masia Academy kids into the starting 11 again. So the last few years, we've seen Pedri come in, we've seen Gavi, we Ansu Fati, who we saw move to Brighton. Had not necessarily the best loan spell, but Fati is still someone that I think we're probably going to see in the future. Yamin Yamal, who's like 16 or 17, who has been an absolute star. He's probably going to star for Spain. You imagine the only thing you worry about is him maybe being overplayed at such a young age. But he looks, it's. I need to be careful here. He looks the closest that I've seen so far to the next Neymar that I've seen. He has the same kind of movements with the ball, the same kind of frame as well. We'll see if that pans out or not. But he looks something. It's interesting to see he's Spanish too, because it's not something that Spain normally have. And then Fermin Lopez, a right midfielder that can play kind of anywhere in the attack. Paulo Kubasi, a 17-year-old defender that looked incredible in the Champions League run. He just for being 17, he was unbelievable with PSG, and his pass accuracy is off the charts good. So there's a lot of stuff coming in with the academy now for them to kind of work with. The only player that maybe didn't really work out with Xavi was the Brazilian that they brought in, and it's almost like they tried to copy what Real Madrid did with Victor Roca, and but I think he's only 18, maybe he just turned it. Rodrigo and Vinny didn't hit the ground running his first 2 seasons either, so he's just turned 18. It feels crazy to overreact, but apparently there's been a lot of negative stuff said about him that maybe they were fooled, maybe he's a dud. I don't know. There's talks that they want to move him already. But that's the thing too. With Real Madrid didn't just get lucky with Vinny and Rodrigo. They had years of established relationships and connections, agents, and it's not just being able to find a scout and to get a Brazilian player. That's kind of what Chelsea's doing. Chelsea's just buying all Brazilians that they can right at the moment. Esteve, Paez. Uh, and we'll see if maybe that works out or not. Last time we're trying to sign this young Brazilian Luis Guilherme, but it's not just that the Brazilian Real Madrid knew who Vinny and Rodrigo were going to be because of those relationships that had already been established. You can't just find a needle in a haystack and get lucky. So but that things were at least starting to at least look like there was something to build onto, something to hold onto, and instead now, yeah, they didn't have the best league season this year. I think they finished 15 points behind Girona, so they finished in third, not even close to being second. And if it wasn't for Aranja, who completely lost his head with a stupid red card versus PSG, and Casello gave away a stupid PK in that game as well. Maybe they could have gotten by Dortmund. I think Yamal had a play where they actually it was either Rafinha or someone scored. They actually had the lead in the tie before that entirely flipped. So uh, they weren't that far away. And the league season didn't go that great. Maybe there was some kind of board discussions or some kind of some animosity because Xavi first threatened like he was going to leave, and then the board was like, "No, we want you to stay," and then they sacked him anyways. So that was kind of weird. The only thing I would say is possible that Xavi was overplaying, over reliant on his young players. You were starting to see injuries to Gavi and Pedri. You worry about that with Yamal going forward. But yeah, out Xavi goes, and now in comes Hansi Flick, and he's going to be going to bring a different kind of intensity to Barcelona that we have seen. Uh, that whole talk about having a midfield that is just superior technically and not one that works without the ball, that's going to change. He is going to get them to work without the ball, and the only issue is, do they have a back line to do that? Do they have a can they handle playing at high line? Can they handle that kind of pressing intensity? Do they have the midfield to do that to ball win? You look at the minute, it doesn't know if you don't know if they do. I don't know if Pedri can necessarily do that. I don't necessarily as much as I like him. Frankie De Jong, he doesn't seem like that kind of player as well. Maybe he's got that engine room. Fermin Lopez maybe has that, but you don't really know. You don't really have a Tchouaméni or a Camavinga in that kind of sixth position that you would need, or even a Busquets. You don't really have that. They're playing like Andreas Christensen at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see how this Flick era works. And another thing too is they were starting to kind of do make the same mistakes that they were before. So last season they brought in Gundogan, who had a decent season for them, and he's been kind of the anchor, that pivot before they've tried Christensen. But he's not that kind of player either. And he's also older, he's more established. And then they brought in Aurel Romelu in, and again, there's just that's kind of that's kind of the mistakes that they were doing beforehand. But then things started to change a little bit. So they paid money for it, but they bought Ferran Torres, uh, who I'd maybe like to see them be the feature guy because Lua kind of looks past his prime. But the real one is Eric Garcia. They bought him off Man City. Now they paid a pretty penny for him, and it's good that they're not linked to Bernardo Silva anymore. So it looks like they maybe changed the strategy a little bit because you need to bring in players before they move to a big club, or because a lot of problems really have been, or not just Barca, everywhere, is wages and agent fees. So the future is looking okay. I mean, Eric Garcia just had a really good loan spell for Girona. No, he wasn't. They didn't even like him at Barcelona, but he just had a very good loan spell for Girona. So Eric Garcia is probably going to be someone. Him and Kubasai are probably going to be kind of who they look at for their back line. But and another play they have is Alex Balde. Can they're going to try to use him the way that Flick used Alfonso Davies? But it's gonna be fun. I mean, they've like I said, Pedri, Frankie De Jong, Gavi, Ferran Lopez. Uh, you've got Ferran Torres, Yamin Lamal, Kibasai, Eric Garcia again, Aranjo, Kunde, Fati, and Rafinha, and even Hector Fort. He showed some promise as a 17-year-old fullback. So they do have some talent for Flick to work with. And it wasn't that far away from being close. It was seen as a disaster, league campaign, but they weren't far away from maybe even being in the Champions League final this year. So that's where Barca are, and the reason why I'm focusing on Barca is they do have a lot of work to catch up to the main rivals, and Spain probably needs that. Spain just can't have Real Madrid, being yeah, I don't necessarily the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant essentially, where there's just no, oh, you know, at least with the Golden State Warriors and Kevin Durant, there was a LeBron James and the Cavs to at least give them some kind of competition. You worry, maybe that's Man City, but it's not that you don't have that in necessarily the league if Barcelona is not going to be what they've been in the past. And so why is it different? What have Madrid done that's different than what Barcelona did? Well, with the mistakes that Barcelona did? And so what has Perez done? So in the beginning, I thought they maybe made similar mistakes. They overspent for Eden Hazard. They brought in Juka Jovic for a lot of money from Eintracht Frankfurt. It didn't work out. But in 19 and 20, they start to do some things that are different. So luck maybe does play a role, but again, and they had some financial constraints. But because of that, they went big on the future. They bet big on the future. So they're doing the big stadium renovations for a few years. They lose Ronaldo. They put faith in two very young and raw Brazilians that are 17, 16 years old. And that seemed to be their transfer strategy shifting. They went big on Camavinga. They bought him at 17 years old. They didn't wait for him to go to PSG and play a little bit. They saw what he was doing at 17 in the Champions League for Rennes, and they were like, "We'll pay 30 million for this guy that we think is going to be a monster in a couple of years." They brought in Rodrigo for 45 million from Santos. Vinny, 45 million from Flamengo. They paid 45 million for Endrick from Palmeiras, and you see the amounts. Not every club can do that. Not every club can just put all this promise on the future. So Madrid do have built-in advantages, obviously, but it's also this could backfire, and so far it hasn't. And as my friend Rex has said, it's not really getting lucky. They're not just identifying and grabbing these players out of nothing. Again, the work's been put in already. With the right scouting networks and agent relationships to know ahead of time who's legit, or first who's just dominating at a younger age. Uh, but they also did well to loan out a lot of their young players. And if you maybe came back to bite them, they lost Hakimi by doing that. They lost Martin Odegaard by doing that, and maybe Teo Hernandez, who went to AC Milan, who's linked to now move to maybe Bayern. But for the most part, it has worked out. They lost Kovacic, but they brought in Valverde, who's maybe his replacement. They got pretty good years out of Isco and Asensio, and they bought them when they were both kind of young as well. Kubu, it was maybe a mistake. We'll have to see about that. But they got good years out of Isco and Asensio before they decided to move off on them. But the main thing was the year that they lost Ronaldo, they went out and immediately signed Courtois from Chelsea, and just a genius effing move. And it's just they did it at a time when they still paid a lot of money for him, like 40 million for a keeper. But they did it at a time when, again, the general consensus was you had to have a ball playing keeper, or a ball with their feet playing keeper. Courtois is maybe a dinosaur, and all he's done is he's still not really great with his feet, but he is an unreal. He's the best keeper, shot stopper in the world. It still is, even recovering from his ACL injury, and you see it, you saw it here, and just they start to make really smart and clever defensive signings. So with Barcelona, it's not like they went entirely on young players, but they started to recognize what contracts were out there, and so they signed Alaba. Alaba helped Bayern win the Champions League, and then they signed him for free. They signed Eder Militao. Now they signed him for a hefty fee, but they signed him from Porto, and they got Antonio Rudiger on a free from Chelsea. And what's weird is they've recognized it's almost like they really do have hindsight because they've went big on the targets that they've wanted. They went big on Bellingham. Militao was pretty big. They went big on Tchouaméni. They went big on Vinny and Rodrigo and Camavinga. But a lot of the rest of the squad was bought on either on loans or frees. And really the main difference is they built up that midfield to just be a dual winning beast. So they bring in Camavinga. They already have Valverde, who's I guess been promoted, or maybe they bought before that, and they already had Casemiro, and they still had good legs out of Cruz and Modric at the time. And then after losing Mbappe, what they still wanted to make a big signing, and they signed Chouameni. And then, the last year, their big signing was Jude Bellingham. Mbappe still wasn't ready to join them, so they go out and sign Jude Bellingham. But even after that, everything was either on freeze or loans, and it's just they went big on like one or two players. It's not like they were spending 200 million every single window. Uh, so they've been able to build this Galacticos team in an entirely different way than others have in the past. And another thing too is the sauce is getting rid of players at the right time, recognizing when a contract is coming up, or when players are kind of maybe on the edge of being past it. So they recognized when to move players off the conveyor belt, essentially. So Rafael Varane to Man United. Now Man United were able to get a couple good years out of Rafael Varane. They got top four. They won a couple. They won two trophies with Rafael Varane. But they were like Real Madrid was like, we can get a lot of money for shipping him out, and we can bring in Eder Militao or a Rudiger and Casemiro. I mean, the real surprise was Casemiro because that was before they necessarily had brought in Chouameni, and Casemiro was one of the players of the Champions League final in 22. But maybe he was showing some signs, and they bring in Chouameni, and just they haven't had an issue replacing him. And everyone knows Casemiro has kind of been a little bit of a fit for Man United the last year, so they just recognize when to do that. Benzema wins the Ballon d'Or, wins the 22 Champions League as well, and they recognize maybe it was time to lose him, and so they lose him to a Saudi club. No one's really heard of him since, and they didn't even go out to replace him. And another thing too is they handled losing Sergio Ramos just better, much better than Barca did with Piqué. They recognized when the time was to move off of him, and they did. And so one thing you're doing when you're shipping players out is, yeah, you're getting a transfer fee for it, but what you're doing is you're limiting the wages on it, because players on that age they're established. They've got higher wages in their contracts. And again, the wage structure is really a lot of this. Why some teams can make it work, and why some teams can't. It's not always the transfer fee, um, but also just the genuine look into the future for their squad planning. It's been much different than Barcelona's approach. That's been more kind of instant gratification. Look for people that would be instant success. They signed someone like Robert Lewandowski, and it is much different than Real Madrid bringing in Hasselu for free. No, it's not really the same player, but I think in the Champions League, Hasselu maybe had the same amount of goals as Lewandowski. I'll have to look at that, but he had like five. Um, but also they have defenders that can play in a high line. Like they've built a squad that is modernized for the game, or in the box. They can head it away. But that is what Rudiger, that is what Eder Militao can do. Uh, they also have everyone's calm on the ball. Everyone's good on the ball. They can handle being pressed. They can dual their midfield to both dual win and be press resistant, technically sound, and runners off the ball in their attack. They don't just have final third kind of half space players. Now they do have that somewhat in Udur, in Arda Gular, in Brahim Diaz. So they have that in spades. But they have lightning people on the counter, and they've just added another in Mbappe. But and so kind of the one thing to kind of end off with as well is, again, i- i- they have built-in advantages. It's not like every team can do that, and so they've taken advantage of their advantages. Madrid have this incredible PR and media machines to attract any player they want. They have they have a bunch of outlets that basically do the kind of like transfer rumors for them. Well, they'll just make up news and make up a rumor and get a player to basically being agreeing to a move before a player's even done it, before an agent has done it, and it basically gets into the senses of everyone expecting the player to make that move, and then the player starts to think about it even more. They've done stuff like that. They're very good at manipulating moves that they want. Uh, but another thing that they've done is they've identified the right coach to handle this team. At least now, we'll see what happens after Ancelotti. But Ancelotti is a piece of this. And so what is the story of this? So I mentioned the coaches for Barcelona. So let's talk about what Real Madrid have had. So they had Zidane, winning three Champions League finals, and it seemed he didn't want to do it anymore. And he leaves, and what happens after that is they bring in first Lopetegui and then Solari, and it doesn't really work out. So they bring Zidane back, and Zidane comes back for a couple years from 2019 to 2021, and they had a couple decent Champions League runs. They beat Liverpool in 2021, only to lose to Chelsea in the semifinals. They did win a league title under Zidane, but it wasn't the same. And so he steps away in May 2021. And then they bring in Ancelotti back. So Ancelotti actually helped win them the Champions League in 2014. And he stepped away. And then before that came Rafa Benitez. And that didn't work. So that's when they brought in Zidane, Mr. Champion, Mr. Real Madrid himself, Zinedine Zidane. And so so after all that, they bring in Ancelotti back. And it was very interesting as well because this came after interesting runs at Bayern. He won at Bayern, won a league title at Bayern, but they never really did anything in the Champions League. There was a lot of stuff that players didn't like him. Players didn't like his approach to the game. They thought it was weird. He was smoking on the during training. Didn't necessarily focus on fitness. It didn't seem like they necessarily played without the ball. It seemed outdated. Essentially, the training tactics. There was a bunch of articles at the time critiquing how Ancelotti was doing stuff at Bayern, and then he moved to Napoli. The same things kind of happened. There are a lot of negative stuff, and then he goes to Everton out of nothing. And what's funny enough is we need to look back at that time at Everton because his idea of just letting Jaime, uh, basically James or James Rodriguez, just having freedom on the ball to look to cross it in to Calvert Lewin wasn't the worst idea to play football. And he got Everton like eighth. At the time, we didn't realize how good that was. And so out of nowhere, he leaves Everton to go to Real Madrid at a time where you just didn't know how this was going to work out. Again, he was considered a dinosaur by a lot of writers at the time. He never brought into like the latest things, the latest the gang impression, the inverted fullbacks, playing 60 passes with the keeper. And instead, they brought in someone that would be perfect to nurture and develop Vinny and Rodrigo, but also someone to manage the minutes of Modric and an aging Tony Cruz. And man, has it worked out. It is, and he just, I think it's a perfect guy to get what he got out of Bellingham. I don't really get how they were able to score this many goals with a front three of Rodrigo, Bellingham, and Vinny. Because Bellingham's not a striker. He had never really played this position, I think, beforehand. And they really did make it work. I mean, the bench was Brahim Diaz and Danny Ceballos for the most part. So it wasn't it wasn't that strong of a team, and they were able to do a double. And just again, so many times they were outplayed, and whether it's a dark magic mentality, people talk about built-in mentality. It's happened too often to be more than luck. So I don't know. I don't know what to really call it. And then all that's setting up is now we have the Galacticos 3.0. And they've managed to win the top prize 2 out of the last 3 years, and when they were supposed to be rebuilding the squad, and now they're set to basically become another Galacticos team. And so when I grew up, I just knew in the 2000s, early 2000s, you had Ronaldo 9, you had Guti, you had David Beckham, you had Michael Owen, you had Raul, Luis Figo, Roberto Carlos, all on the same damn team. And then after 2009, after the Champions League final in either 2000, yeah, it was 2009 versus I guess Barcelona. What do they do that summer? They signed Ronaldo, R7. They bring in the then Ballon d'Or winner, or maybe from the past year in Kaká. They bring in Di Maria. Then they added Gareth Bale and James Rodriguez to that like the next following years. And so this is what they do. Every like decade, every 15 years or so, this is what they do. And now they're about to do something similar with Vinny, Mbappe. Maybe it's Rodrigo, maybe it's not. But Bellingham, Endrick. There looks like it's possibly going to be Alfonso Davies, Fede Valverde, Camavinga, Tchouaméni. It's just these are all names that everyone's going to recognize. Either they do already, or they do, and just the and Mbappe is going to be the head of it. Mbappe is going to be the head of it on a team that Vinny is going to be the Ballon d'Or holder. It's just it is impressive stuff. And the one note I had is it's the banter period. And this was kind of when I was, like, starting to really getting into watching, football, at least, club football in Europe, 'cause, we finally had a cable, subscription to, like, be in, and their banter period was when they had Arjen Robben at his prime, Wesley Sneijder, or, like, Huntelaar kind of leading them. I think Beckham was on that team as well, kind of aging out. Just that was their banter times. So this is a different club than anyone else has, and again, built-in advantages. But it's so well run. It is what it is, and so where does this put us up going forwards? England did not have the strongest UCL run or in Europe run either. In any of the competitions, and is the competition in the league too strong now? Because the TV contracts are so well so uh, uh, so well managed, I guess, or spread out, so well separated that you've got clubs like a Bournemouth that can actually spend more than like an Atletico Madrid in a transfer window. It's just no other league has that kind of a competition. Really, competitive balance is what I'm looking for. And is that maybe that's great for the league itself, but when it comes to doing well in the biggest competitions that everyone cares about, is it maybe a is it maybe a cudgel? Is it maybe harder because if you've got a league game on Sunday versus Chelsea or versus Aston Villa, and then you turn around and you have or Liverpool, pick whatever, a Newcastle, pick whoever you want, and then you have to turn around and play a Champions League game in the midweek. Is that harder than necessarily Real Madrid having to do an Alvarez or Getafe, things of that nature. It feels like that could maybe be argued in a few years. What are we going to see? Is it just going to be a who's who of Real Madrid versus City for the next like 5 years? How will Madrid function without Tony Cruz? That's going to be. Will Alba have a bigger role? We haven't really seen Alba for the last few years. Alaba can maybe do kind of the interesting things that Tony Cruz can do. They're stupidly, or I said stupidly, they're recently linked to Trent Alexander-Arnold, which I'm not really a fan of because Bellingham and Arnold are quite good friends, as everyone knows. Arnold's contract is coming out. He could possibly see a life, basically a change, a once in a lifetime chance, basically. If Madrid come calling and he doesn't want to extend, Liverpool might have to sell. You could see him at Real Madrid. I think he's that caliber of a player, and he wouldn't necessarily be playing in midfield. I think they'd use him at right back, but they could use the way he uses the ping balls, and you've got those kind of runners in behind for him to play off of. You can see it happening. So we'll see if that happens or not. What are they gonna do with Bellingham? They're just gonna use him as an additional midfielder. They're gonna try to anchor him still. Are they gonna try Mbappe in Rodrigo position on the right? Are they gonna change Mbappe? These are all questions that are still out there, but these are good questions for Madrid fans to have. And then the final end, I'll end with Dortmund. I do think. What more can you do? I do think one thing I'm gonna say is in the mini preview I had, I am going to kind of pat myself a little bit on the back because I said the things I would probably watch out for would be Schlotterbeck and Hummels. I do think I was like they're pretty good with balls over the top. They have pretty good delivery on them. Could maybe Dortmund get in behind? I was also wondering with Fulkrug and Adeyemi, can they make those runs in behind? That's basically what we saw. So there wasn't a lot of surprise in how they played. It was just unfortunate it wasn't enough, and just a lot of energy. They did just kind of it just it took it out of them. So I just think that really was it is. They ran out of energy. But just the positives, they moved the ball exceptionally well. They transitioned well. Chan was great at kind of anchoring the back line, and just Madrid were trying to press them in the turnovers, and they did. Even when Madrid laid off, they were able to pick those passes. They all three were very very good. The work rate in the midfield by Brandt and Sabitzer was excellent as well. They covered so much ground. Fulkrug was doing those that Evan Ferguson Brighton stuff, like I was saying, when he was running into midfield and doing wall passes to get around people, to play around Carvajal or play around someone, play around Camavinga, and we're doing very good there. And just that's probably something we can maybe see for Germany to kind of think about. And Ryerson got toasted, but he did as well as he probably could have on Vinny. I think there's something about that. But also, he looked very good going forward. Dortmund have a right back. He can also play on the left as well. They've got a player on their hands. The work rate that he had was amazing. He was still making runs even in the 90th minute. I don't know how. He looks quite a player. So that's positive. And then where did this go wrong? Just the subs. Yeah, I think taking off Adeyemi, everything changed with that. Bringing on Marco Royce didn't make sense. Didn't make sense for that kind of swap. I understand you're wanting to bring Royce on. Maybe you thought he could do better in the final third. Maybe he'd have a shot on him. It didn't make sense. If Adeyemi had to come off, I don't know, a Bino Gittins or even a Daniel Mallon, were options that would have at least been not necessarily like for like. No one has Adeyemi's pace, but at least someone else to offer some sprints. Marco Reus in 5 years ago maybe would have made sense, but he just didn't have any kind of legs, and you see why he's maybe calling it quits. Sancho wasn't his game as well. Played on the right side. He did a decent job, somewhat defensively, but it feels like he's the 10. He looks better in the middle, and Brandt didn't necessarily have his best game. I think Sancho through the middle would have been better. It's unfortunate we didn't necessarily see that. Brandt's set piece delivery wasn't as good, and the way they used Ian Matson inverted, I didn't really like that as well. And then just Dortmund not really having the bench to change the game when they were trailing. So Malin came on, didn't really look fit. Hilaire had to more defensive duties than necessarily in the attack. Bino Gittins is 19, looks 19. Mukaku, feels like his development has kind of stalled, unfortunately. And just yeah. So where can Dortmund go from here? That's kind of be a little fun. So I mean, they finished fifth in the Bundesliga. Bayern have brought in Vincent Company. No one knows how that's going to work out. Alonso staying at Leverkusen. That's not good for Dortmund. Uh, RB Leipzig just seems to whether or not they're going to lose players again and then rebound. We'll have to see. But Leipzig finished above Dortmund as well, so things aren't going to necessarily be easier for them. They are going to get Champions League again because uh, Germany got awarded another spot for Champions League. So finishing fifth, they're still in Champions League. But the squad to me feels imbalanced as well. Umukaku, Bano Gittins, and even Gia Reyna, none of them have really progressed under Terzic, and so where can they go to kind of build the squad up? So I'm gonna stay in the league. Now, this is just kind of they haven't been linked to any of these players. I haven't looked at contracts, but I'm just gonna something that I was kind of thinking about. This could be a little fun experiment. Uh, what would Bayern do in Dortmund's situation? I think they would look at Seru Jerisey, 28 years old. I think he's probably too young to move to England, but I think he'd be perfect for Dortmund. Give Fulkrug some competition, or maybe to outright replace him. I think Steven Haller's best days probably behind him. Jersey scored like 22 goals in the league. He's been linked to some clubs in England, but I think you could possibly get a run at him, uh, and then stay in the league. Where can you maybe go as far as like a DM or CM kind of player? Manu Kone of Gladbach has been keeps being a player that I've been surprised hasn't moved. Maybe a Chan replacement. Maybe you can play alongside Chan or Lucas Gunadara of Salzburg. Feels like he's maybe ready to make the jump as well. He's probably going to be moved to Leipzig because that's usually what they do. But Leipzig or Salzburg and Dortmund have a decent relationship as well. That they got Holland from here. They got Adeyemi from Salzburg. So maybe you can go there because I feel like they're Chan once whether or not Chan was able to play through injury or not, when Chan's also up there in age, you need to kind of think about at least the future. So I would maybe look there. As far as kind of a center back spot, one player I looked at was Maxence Lacroix, center back out of Wolfsburg, 25 years old. Could maybe replace Hummels, or at least give him competition. He plays you could play in a high line with him. He's much more physically adept at least than Hummels. He's not nearly as good on the ball, but he's got terrific pace and he times his tackles well. From the games that I've seen, big, physical, and quick. He was linked at one point to Liverpool. You can maybe look there. And then as far as right wing, you need to have someone that's likewise to Adeyemi. I don't know if you're not gonna. Sancho to me is better off as a 10. Also, he's at Man United player. He's only on loan. Did Dortmund even buy him? Sancho's also on a high wage bill. Where can you go as far as finding someone else? So I was looking at Adingra, Samina Adingra of Brighton. There's a guy, Bakayoko of PSV. He's been linked to a bunch of moves in England, but maybe Dortmund would have a say in having a chance with him. Antonio Nusa almost moved of Club Brugge, nearly move to Brentford in January. Could maybe you snatch him up here? You could offer him Champions League. That's not something Brentford can offer. Christian Somerville, Cristancio Somerville of Leeds has also been linked to a move this summer. Could you offer him Champions League as well? So he's not really got the Adeyemi pace, but he's quite a fun kind of attacking kind of a uh, wide player or attacker, maybe 10 as well. He's a little bit more dynamic than maybe a Jaden Sancho. So could you maybe look at some of those kind of those players, and then with the USWMT with Emma Hayes era, 4-0 win over South Korea, 2 goals from Mallory Swanson, formerly Mallory Pugh. 2 goals from corner kicks, 550 passes completed, 15 shots. No Morgan, no Rapinoe. Different team now. Sophia Smith with a nice assist for the first goal. And I think it's going to be a big Olympics for Sophia Smith. If the U.S. do well, I think Sophia Smith might even be the face of it. Uh, but also because she was supposed to be the face of the World Cup, and it just didn't work out. Uh, but another thing too was Rose Lavelle when basically the team in the in Australia, from what I remember, that team went with Rose Lavelle. There were a couple times when she wasn't even playing, and it just the team didn't function when she was sitting. And then she got yellow carded out for Sweden in the final game, and they missed her. And so Jaden Shaw is another player that has been kind of a big star to emerge. If Lavelle can't go, maybe Jaden Shaw is the replacement. She was probably the standout star in the Gold Cup that I talked about. Katerina Macario is another we didn't really see in the Olympics or see in the World Cup because of an injury. She looks to probably be part of the Olympic team. A coach that was that apparently is at Chelsea, so maybe Emma Hayes even knows her already. And then another player that I remember at least being talked about for Australia that doesn't maybe look expected to make the Olympics team, which I think would be a mistake, is Alyssa Thompson. So do we see her or not? She was seen as maybe like the next coming star, but apparently she's had some injury issues this WNSL season, or at least maybe last year. She's not expected to make the team. So just a couple years ago, she was seen as the next future. So I'd be a little bit surprised about that. So I don't know what will we see in Paris. Will it be better than Australia was? We'll have to see, and that's probably a little bit of the rundown that we have here. And so yeah, that's it. That's it for the end at least of the I guess the season. I think I'll probably do that's the end for the club season. Uh, there are Euros and Copa coming up. Maybe I'll do a mini maybe a mini preview for Euros. I don't think I'll do anything for Copa. Probably I'll cover like the U.S. games, but I won't like maybe I'll do a little U.S. preview. But that'll probably be about it. Maybe I'll do a couple episodes in between. Having a guest, Jeremy or Rex. Do maybe a little update on the tournament. Nothing in depth, or maybe kind of get onto some general topics. Talk about that. We'll see. We'll see what we have planned in. But until then, maybe back for next season. But yeah, till then, you guys stay swatty and stop recording.